Hello and welcome back to another video. This is the fourth episode of story where Naruto responds to his isolation in a way that deviates from canon. What strategies will Konoha employ to handle a seal master Jinchuriki who possesses a subdued attitude yet an outrageous perverted side? Please like and subscribe to show your support. It's high time to begin. As the various teams continued their individual journeys of growth and camaraderie, the village itself seemed to hum with a renewed energy. Naruto's absence was felt by his friends and mentors, but his influence was still evident everywhere, from the technological advancements of Project Leaf to his growing impact on the younger generation, especially his surrogate younger brother, Konohamaru. Even his fellow genin and Konoha's elite jonin were feeling the ripple effects of his unique abilities and diligent pursuit of progress. In the hospital, the medical staff had grown accustomed to Naruto's quiet but diligent presence, and some even missed his habit of intently listening to their discussions, absorbing every detail as if they were teaching him directly. Tsunade, despite her frustrations, had poured herself into her duties, guiding other medics and ensuring her teachings to Naruto would be put into practice upon his return. As the days went by, each training ground echoed with the sounds of dedicated practice and instruction. Ino's mastery of her new knuckle knives continued to sharpen, Tenten's Fuinjutsu-enhanced techniques became more formidable, and even the occasionally brash Kiba began to adopt a more calculated approach under Kurenai's guidance. Gai's unbreakable enthusiasm and fiery guidance pushed Neji, Tenten, and Lee to new limits, each of them propelled by a unique motivation, some inspired, others, like Neji, reluctant to admit admiration for Naruto's accomplishments but still driven to keep up. In the midst of these developments, Hiruzen continued to monitor the progress of the Chunin exam preparations and the restructuring of Konoha's infrastructure. Between fielding endless paperwork and defusing Tsunade's grievances about her student's absence, he couldn't help but smile as he thought about his grandson's effect on the village. Naruto's influence had become like the roots of a vast tree, quietly strengthening the village and its people in ways both large and small. And as Naruto's return approached, the atmosphere within Konoha grew more charged. From the ANBU murmuring about the upcoming Chunin exams to villagers catching on to the changes within their shinobi, there was an undercurrent of anticipation, one that was both thrilling and a little unnerving. The village was moving forward, and though challenges lay ahead, it was clear that Naruto's spirit and the will of fire would continue to shine brightly, inspiring Konoha to reach new heights. Jiraiya's familiar voice crackled through the communicator seal, nearly startling Naruto, though he kept his expression neutral. The timing couldn't have been better. Orochimaru's fascination with his own narrative seemed to keep him oblivious to the slight chakra disturbance in Naruto's sleeve. "Kid, you still holding up?" Jiraiya's voice echoed, edged with a mixture of tension and assurance. Naruto slightly adjusted his arm, subtly pressing his palm to the seal under his sleeve. "Still waiting on you to fetch me. How's the rest of the team? Ready to move in? Keep him talking just a little longer." Naruto's mind raced, weaving together a plan as Orochimaru continued with his tale, clearly relishing each detail he shared. "I wanted Minato because he possessed a rare willingness," Orochimaru said, his voice shifting into a nostalgic lilt. "A willingness to push beyond the boundaries even Konoha imposed. I admired it deeply. And now I see it again, manifesting in you." Kabuto, standing at the door, crossed his arms with a scowl. Naruto didn't miss the restrained glint of jealousy in Kabuto's eyes. Orochimaru's praise wasn't something freely given. Naruto took a slow breath, angling his question to buy a little more time. "And you believe that's all it takes? Talent and willingness to push boundaries?" He wanted to keep Orochimaru on the edge of an explanation, away from any suspicions. The Snake Sanin's smile widened, intrigued by the response. "Talent is only a spark, Naruto-kun. It's the vision to use that talent that makes it worthwhile. Most people waste their gifts on loyalty and the restrictive morals of their village." Orochimaru leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with calculated fervor. "You, however, could achieve greatness. Beyond even your father's vision. A beat of silence hung as Naruto considered his options. While Orochimaru reveled in his own ego, the realization hit Naruto: this wasn't just about his potential or the ceiling arrays. Orochimaru was testing him, and somewhere in that twisted obsession lay the Sanin's plan. So, I'm to believe your goal is my greatness? Naruto asked, letting his voice carry a hint of skepticism. Kukuku, you're perceptive, Naruto-kun. But even greatness needs a mentor. Just then, Jiraiya's voice buzzed again. Almost there, kid. Get ready to move on my mark. Naruto gave a faint nod, feigning attention on Orochimaru's words. I'm sure you understand why I'm not exactly convinced. Of course, Orochimaru said smoothly, reclining slightly, his hand waving dismissively. But you're young yet, and you haven't seen the true limits of Konoha's ideals. The faint sound of shifting rubble nearby told Naruto that Jiraiya and the team were closing in. Orochimaru's gaze turned hawkish, his stare piercing through Naruto. But enough about me. Tell me, Naruto-kun, what is it you seek? Surely you've questioned your path in Konoha. Naruto met his eyes steadily, a shadow of a smirk tugging at his lips. What I seek? I suppose you'll have to wait and find out. And with that, Jiraiya's voice thundered through the communicator, now. Naruto sprang from his seat, chakra bursting into his limbs as he vaulted over the table. Orochimaru's eyes widened, his thin-lipped grin twisting as he saw Naruto move, not away, but directly toward him. It was a feint. Naruto's outstretched hand flicked a small, chakra-charged sealing tag against the Sanin's sleeve, a contingency. Jiraiya had drilled into him for this very moment. As the tag activated, a pulse of sealing energy shot through Orochimaru's arm, rooting him to the ground momentarily. Jiraiya burst through the doorway with a kunai in hand, his face taut with determination. Behind him, Sai and Haku entered, their weapons at the ready. Orochimaru chuckled despite his immobilized arm. Ah, Jiraiya. Ever the thorn. Kabuto lunged forward, only for Sai to meet him head-on, their kunai clashing with a spark. Jiraiya turned his gaze to Orochimaru, a silent command passing between them before he looked back at Naruto. Ready to leave, kid? Naruto nodded, retreating toward Haku, who covered his back. More than ready. Orochimaru's gaze darkened, and he sneered, the seals on his arm weakening as he twisted his fingers into a rapid series of seals. You think you can waltz out so easily? He thrust his free hand to the ground, summoning a thick cloud of poison mist that began to swirl around the room. Haku, cover. Jiraiya barked, and with a wave of her hand, a mirror of ice sprung from the ground, blocking the miasma as she flashed Naruto a nod. As they retreated through the corridor, Naruto shot a glance over his shoulder at Orochimaru, his voice low but laced with resolve. Next time, let's skip the dinner. The team sprinted down the corridor, leaving the crumbling lair and its captive master behind. The battlefield was littered with evidence of a fierce struggle, trees marred with deep slashes, the ground torn and scorched. Jiraiya's heart sank as he took in the scene. His team should have been resting safely at the inn he'd arranged for them, yet here they were, bloodied and bruised. His godson, Naruto, was focused, tending to Sai and Haku, who were clearly worse for wear. Jiraiya's voice was tense as he approached. Naruto, what happened? Naruto looked up, his usual brightness subdued by the weight of recent events. It was Oto, he replied grimly. One of them was Kabuto Yakushi, you remember him? He used to work at the hospital. He was way stronger than a genin. The others called themselves the Sound Four. They used curse marks and overwhelmed us. Haku took an arrow to the abdomen, but her flak jacket caught most of it. Still hurt her, though, nearly broke a rib. Sai's got a concussion and a dislocated shoulder, but I treated him as best I could. Jiraiya took this in, frowning, but something in Naruto's voice hinted there was more. Is there anything else? He prompted. Naruto hesitated, then looked Jiraiya in the eye. Yes, he said finally. We're both clones. Their mission was to capture the original. Jiraiya's eyes widened, anger flaring in him before he reined it back. What? His voice dropped to a measured calm, trying to think through the implications. All right. I can reverse summon him. It's not ideal, but it's an option. But Naruto's clone shook his head. The boss doesn't think you should. And why not? They didn't want him dead. They took him alive, which means they're taking him back to some kind of base. The locator seal is active, and once you're in range, the communicator seal will be, too. This is a chance to gather intel, maybe confirm what you suspected. The clone's reasoning was clear and sharp. Jiraiya felt a pang of guilt, he'd been too quick to react. He cursed his own recklessness. His mind churned over the possibilities. If Orochimaru was indeed behind this, if Oto was connected to him as Jiraiya feared, then this could be a rare opportunity. The capture of Naruto was a grave risk, but if they could reach him in time, this mission could be a turning point. How much longer until the communicator is online? He demanded. 20 minutes at the most, Naruto's clone replied. Jiraiya nodded, suppressing his impatience. He waited, his mind a whirl of plans and contingencies. The clone dispelled at last, transferring its information back to the original Naruto, and Jiraiya wasted no time. He led what remained of his team, moving with a grim determination, his usual lightheartedness replaced by a hardened resolve. Whatever lay ahead, he was prepared to face it head-on. Sai and Haku struggled to keep up, the pain of their injuries fresh and unyielding, but neither dared to slow their pace. They knew their sensei's focus had sharpened into something fierce and unbreakable, and they wouldn't be left behind. They pushed themselves to match his relentless speed, each step fueled by the same sense of urgency and purpose. As they raced toward Naruto's location, the communicator seal flickered to life. Haku felt it first, and a wave of self-reproach washed over her. She'd failed her friend when he needed her most, her hesitation on the battlefield had been costly. That single moment of weakness, of mercy, had endangered Naruto, and the regret burned inside her. She swore to herself she'd never make that mistake again, no matter what it cost her. Naruto-kun, are you hurt? She asked, her voice taut with worry. No, came his steady reply. We're 7 minutes out, Haku vowed, her words carrying a fierce determination. She would reach him. She would make things right, no matter what. As Naruto waited for his teammates to arrive, his mind raced through every survival instinct, every bit of training drilled into him by his mentors. He'd managed to listen long enough to Orochimaru's twisted ramblings, but time was running short, and the element of surprise was slipping away. Channeling chakra, he activated a hidden seal on Kabuto's arm, setting off a chain reaction that Orochimaru noticed instantly. Without a moment's hesitation, the snake Sannin severed Kabuto's arm and raised a defensive mud wall, shielding them both from the explosion Naruto had triggered. When the smoke cleared, Orochimaru realized his young captive had vanished. Kabuto lay on the floor, writhing in agony over his severed arm, his value to Orochimaru only slightly diminished. The older Sannin merely smirked, intrigued by Naruto's cunning. As he tried to open the door, Orochimaru found himself trapped by another of the genin seals. He chuckled, equal parts irritated and impressed, wondering what Naruto-kun planned to do next. Meanwhile, Naruto moved swiftly through the shadowy halls of the base, his mind replaying lessons from his Aji-san, Jiraiya. In enemy territory, leave no room for mercy. Cause chaos, weaken their forces, and eliminate his targets. Every step was calculated, every trap and seal meticulously prepared to sow confusion and fear among Orochimaru's followers. He'd already tagged the Sound 4, Orochimaru's elite bodyguards, and tonight he planned to bring them down, one by one. Naruto's first encounter was with Sakon, whose hurried footsteps gave him away as he rallied a small group toward Orochimaru's location. Setting a blinding flashbang, Naruto descended from the ceiling, taking Sakon by surprise. With a single deadly strike, he ended Sakon's life, sealing the body with a silent determination. There was no time to dwell on it, he had minutes, not hours, to finish his mission. The next target, Jirobo, loomed ahead, a hulking figure responsible for injuring Sai. Naruto struck quickly, aiming for a lethal blow, but Jirobo's brute strength proved formidable. Their clash was brutal and close quarters, with Naruto using every trick he knew to evade the giant's crushing blows. At last, with a well-timed kunai to the throat, Naruto brought Jirobo down. He didn't pause to celebrate his success, nor to catch his breath. The mission wasn't over yet, and the clock was ticking. But the base was far from empty, and as Naruto advanced deeper, he encountered a group of Oto's soldiers led by a particularly confident shinobi. The man taunted him, but Naruto could see the subtle glances of his followers. They were looking to their leader for reassurance. In a swift, deadly move, Naruto neutralized their leader, detonating Senbon and reducing the group to chaos. Blood and smoke filled the hallways, but Naruto forced himself to ignore the carnage. He pushed forward, one step closer to his goal. As he descended to the lower levels, Kidamaru, the spider-like archer of the Sound Four, targeted him from above with golden arrows. The arrows were relentless, and Naruto soon realized that Kidamaru had a tactical advantage he couldn't easily counter. Swallowed in a cloud of smoke and surrounded by clones, Kidamaru fought fiercely, using his cursed mark to hold his ground. But in his arrogance, he was too slow to notice Naruto's final clone descending from above, tagging him with a sealing jutsu that disabled his cursed mark. Without his chakra defenses, Kidamaru plummeted, his broken body collapsing several floors below. By the time Naruto reached his last target, Taiyuya, he was battered, exhausted, and his time was running out. The kunoichi sneered at him, taunting him with vile language as she threatened the prisoners. But Naruto knew better than to play by her rules. Using a basic genjutsu to distract her, he moved in close, breaking her nose with a precise strike. Before he could finish her off, a sudden, brutal kick sent him flying. Taiyuya's backup had arrived. Naruto looked up to see a tall, white-haired figure standing over him. Kagaya Kimimaro, Orochimaru's most loyal and deadly follower, had arrived to clean up the mess. The boy's speed and skill were superior, forcing Naruto to stay on the defensive, dodging bone blades with a mixture of instinct and desperation. Kimimaro's expression was calm, almost reverent, his dedication to Orochimaru evident in every calculated strike. But Naruto wasn't deterred. Waiting for the perfect moment, he baited Kimimaro into an opening, letting him strike his shoulder while Naruto prepared his Rasengan. Just as he was about to land the blow, Jiraiya's summoning jutsu activated, pulling Naruto from the battlefield. In an instant, Naruto found himself back with his team. Haku's arms wrapped around him, her face tight with worry and relief, but Naruto barely registered her warmth. He'd failed, or at least that's how it felt. Two of the Sound Four were still alive, and Orochimaru himself was still a threat. Before he could process his frustration, a sinister, familiar voice echoed through the air. "Kukuku. Naruto-kun, you certainly caused quite a mess." Orochimaru stood before them, his gaze fixed on Naruto with an unsettling admiration. Jiraiya stepped forward, tense and ready for battle, but the snake Sannin merely smirked, taunting them all with casual cruelty. He hinted at his own plans, at the darkness he saw mirrored in Naruto. "The reason I wanted Minato-kun as a student?" Orochimaru said, his grin widening. "He was a natural-born killer. Just like me, and just like you." The words lingered long after they had retreated, an echo in Naruto's mind that gnawed at him, even as Jiraiya's protective presence guided them away. He wanted to shake off the poison of Orochimaru's voice, but the mission had left its mark. He'd tasted victory, but not satisfaction. He'd tasted violence, but not glory. What lingered instead was a cold, hollow feeling, one that Orochimaru, back in his lair, seemed all too eager to nurture. In the days that followed, Orochimaru studied the aftermath with interest. 2 of his elites were dead, another crippled, and his base compromised, but his fascination with Naruto had only deepened. The Uzumaki boy had shown no signs of joy in his destruction, no pleasure in the pain he inflicted, and that troubled Orochimaru. True strength, in his eyes, came from embracing the thrill of chaos, from savoring every act of violence. He would teach Naruto how to enjoy it. He would make sure of it. Orochimaru-sama, his loyal follower Guren interrupted, "You seem pleased." Excited, Guren-chan, Orochimaru replied, his eyes gleaming. "Our little Naruto-kun has much potential, far more than even his father. I look forward to shaping it." And so, while Naruto and his team returned to Konoha with scars both physical and emotional, Orochimaru plotted his next move. He would line up his pieces, manipulate events from the shadows, and when the time was right, he would make his play. The game was far from over, and as he watched the flames of potential flicker in the distance, Orochimaru's smile was that of a man who had found his next great obsession. The purple-haired Anbu knelt quietly before the Hokage, her masked face lowered as Hiruzen Sarutobi thumbed through the pages of her report with sharp, focused eyes. The details within painted a vivid picture of Naruto's solo mission within enemy territory, and the Sandame's expression shifted between pride and a deep, weary concern. When Jiraiya had first reported Naruto's kidnapping, Hiruzen wasted no time in dispatching an Anbu platoon. Even knowing Orochimaru would likely have moved on, he couldn't afford to let the chance slip by. By the time they arrived, the base was abandoned, cleared of all personnel. But they had swept through it anyway, forensic specialists combing the labyrinthine halls for any trace of Naruto's presence. Fortunately, the young genin had been meticulous in documenting his seals and traps, saving them from accidentally setting off any leftover surprises. But the sheer scale of destruction that Naruto had wrought left the operatives in disbelief. As Kat's report pointed out, this was not the work of a mere rookie genin. As described by Genin Uzumaki, Hiruzen read, Anbu squad found several examples of motion-activated explosions. Genin Uzumaki demonstrates an understanding of psychological manipulation through trap placement. Seals on incapacitated Otonin were linked, attempts to aid a fallen comrade would trigger multiple explosions. The Sandame paused, feeling a surge of both pride and fear. Naruto's actions had been effective, brutally so. Kat's conclusion was direct and decisive: Naruto should be promoted to Chunin and drafted into the Anbu Black Ops. But the old Hokage simply shook his head. "No," he said, setting the report down firmly. "There is safety in anonymity, Hokage-sama," Kat replied, her voice even but carrying an undercurrent of frustration. "You've used that logic for most of his life. An anonymous orphan and an Anbu operative are hardly the same," Hiruzen countered. He motioned for her to rise, and she did so swiftly, her stance still rigid. The Anbu would not aid in his development. It would make him strong, she argued. It worked for Kakashi. For me. Even Itachi. "We don't need another Itachi," Hiruzen murmured, the words heavy with implications. "Naruto-kun is nothing like Itachi," Kat shot back, surprising even herself with the fierceness in her tone. "Their psychologies are fundamentally different. Naruto would never turn on Konoha unless you ordered him to." Her words, unknowingly close to the truth about Itachi, stung Hiruzen more than he. "Let's show. Naruto will never be an Anbu as long as I draw breath," Hiruzen said, his voice low and resolute. "Then place him somewhere else," she pressed. "Cryptanalysis. Engineering. Create a real Fuinjutsu division, put the barrier core under it, promote him to special jounin. He needs to be prepared for the kind of attention he's drawing. It's already outstripping his growth, and it will only get worse. Hiruzen looked at her, his eyes softening. He understood where her urgency was coming from. Naruto was like a beacon, one that both inspired and attracted danger. I know you worry about him, Yugao, he said gently, dropping her ANBU codename. And I know you want to honor Kushina's memory by protecting him. But Naruto must be allowed to grow naturally. I believe he is something special, destined for great things. Kat stiffened slightly at the mention of Kushina. The red-haired Kunoichi had been her mentor, informally, but deeply influential. Kushina's fiery spirit and strength had left a lasting impression on her. He has to be alive to achieve those goals, Kat said, her voice quieter now. Hiruzen sighed, the weight of his role pressing down on him. Yes, he agreed quietly. He has to be alive. But he also has to be tested. Fate, and the choices of foolish old men, have already placed Naruto-kun in harm's way. As much as it pains me to say this, Orochimaru will only be the first of many challenges he'll face. Naruto must become strong enough to withstand all of it. Stronger than his father was. And he will reach his true potential only in the light, not hidden away in ANBU. With all due respect, Hokage-sama, Yugao pressed, that's an impossible expectation. Minato-sama was more than a genius, he was a legend even before he became Hokage. People called him the perfect shinobi, no one else could have matched his strength so young. Hiruzen's expression softened at the mention of his former student, yet his eyes remained resolute. Minato was talented, yes. Incredibly so. But he was not perfect, Yugao. He was simply a man. And as brilliant as he was, even he believed he could be surpassed. He believed Naruto would be the one to do it. Yugao was silent, her heart aching as she listened. Her loyalty to Naruto, and to the memory of Kushina, made her want to push further. But she could see that the Hokage was resolute. His decision was made. Sandem-sama, she tried once more, that's all the more reason to draft him. He needs the kind of dedicated training and experience only ANBU can provide. Kakashi, Jiraiya, even Tsunade, they're all trying, but they're spread thin with other duties. Naruto has no one who can devote themselves to his development full-time. Hiruzen shook his head. My decision is final, Yugao. Naruto-kun was meant to shine in the daylight, not live in the shadows. And he's not that lonely little boy anymore, is he? Tenzo has told me that he's forming bonds, strong ones. He's finally learning what it means to have comrades, to have friends. Putting him in ANBU now would only stifle that growth. Yugao clenched her fists, struggling to contain her frustration. She knew the Hokage had a point, yet her instincts told her Naruto needed more than what he was getting. He was already attracting attention, both inside and outside Konoha. And the threats were growing. Naruto-kun doesn't need Kat, Hiruzen continued softly, his eyes twinkling with a warmth she rarely saw from him these days. But perhaps he needs Yugao. Yugao blinked, startled. She hadn't expected that. You mean? But... Did you really think I allowed Kakashi-kun to be his sensei, brought Jiraiya back into the village, and yet would keep you away? Hiruzen smiled, his voice gentle but firm. I assumed I wouldn't have to tell you this outright. You're free to see him as yourself. He already knows about his parents. There's no reason you need to hide in the shadows when it comes to him. For a moment, Yugao was speechless. She had spent years watching over Naruto from afar, always hiding behind the mask of ANBU, believing it was the only way to protect him. And now, Hiruzen was giving her permission to step forward, to become a more open presence in his life. It was a gift she hadn't realized she wanted, or needed, until now. Thank you, Hokage-sama, she managed, her voice softer, the edge of frustration finally melting away. Hiruzen nodded, relief visible on his face. You honor Kushina by caring for her son, Yugao. But you can do so much more as yourself than as a hidden guardian. Naruto has the spirit of both his parents within him, but he needs guidance and connection to bring out his best. Be there for him, not as Kat, but as Yugao. Yugao felt a surge of determination welling up in her. She could almost see Kushina's smiling face, could almost hear her mentor's voice encouraging her to be bold, to make a difference. She'd always felt that protecting Naruto was part of honoring Kushina's legacy. But now, she realized that being there for him openly, as an ally and a friend, could be just as powerful a way to honor her. I'll do my best, she promised, bowing deeply. Hiruzen's gaze softened. I know you will, Yugao. As she left the Hokage's office, Yugao felt lighter, her mind swirling with possibilities. She had spent so long as a silent shadow, watching Naruto from a distance, yet now she was being asked to step into the light. It was a daunting prospect, but she was ready. If she could offer him guidance, strength, and maybe a little piece of the warmth his parents would have given him, then she would do it without hesitation. For Naruto, she would step out of the shadows. She would make sure he wasn't alone in the trials ahead. Back in his office, Hiruzen set aside the report with a sigh. Despite his calm exterior, he couldn't deny the tension that lingered in his chest. Naruto's recent mission had shown a level of skill and ruthlessness beyond his years. He was progressing quickly, perhaps too quickly for someone so young. Yet Hiruzen could only hope that keeping him in the light, surrounded by people who cared for him, would be enough to guide Naruto down a different path than his former student Itachi, or his wayward student Orochimaru. It was a delicate balance, one that would require faith, patience, and perhaps a bit of luck. But if anyone could bear that weight, it was Naruto Uzumaki, the son of Konoha's yellow flash and its red hot-blooded habanero. Hiruzen had no doubt that the boy was destined for greatness, as long as he didn't lose himself to the darkness that so often crept into the lives of shinobi. Naruto would face many trials, but he would face them with friends by his side. And if Hiruzen had his way, Naruto's life would be one lived in the light. For as long as the Sandaime Hokage drew breath, he would ensure that much. Naruto suppressed a sigh as he finished his report, neatly folding it and sending it through the shared storage seal to Tsunade for review. The events of the past few days had left him feeling hollow, more frustrated than triumphant. He hadn't expected accolades, but Jiraiya's intense disapproval still stung, especially since he had only been trying to protect his friends. If he had known just how reckless his mission would seem to his godfather, perhaps he would have thought twice about going after the Sound Four alone. Kakashi, however, seemed more understanding. As Naruto tended to his sensei's injuries, Kakashi had spoken to him with a calm, even tone, urging him to consider how his friends felt. Haku, in particular, had been a constant presence since his return. She lingered close, offering her silent support but radiating a tension that Naruto couldn't quite understand. And Sai, though outwardly composed as ever, had also expressed his disappointment in his own performance. Naruto felt a pang of guilt at the realization that his friends, too, were struggling in the aftermath of the mission. Kakashi's words about Haku echoed in his mind, maybe she believed she should have been better able to protect you and feels bad she could not. It was hard for Naruto to process. Haku was his friend, not his protector. Yet, thinking back to the fierce look in her eyes when she had held him after the reverse summoning, he couldn't deny that something had changed in her. Kakashi's advice lingered, perhaps she needed some reassurance. Before he could ponder further, Sai returned from his patrol, his usual polite smile in place. We subdued 3 enemy ninja, he reported, his tone as detached as if he were discussing the weather. Naruto blinked. Enemy ninja? Did they try to break through the perimeter? Indeed, Sai replied, with that unsettling calmness Naruto had come to associate with him. They appeared to be scouts. Haku-san and I neutralized them before they could get too close. Excellent work, Kakashi said as he approached, having heard Sai's report on his way back. He clapped Sai on the shoulder and gave Naruto a meaningful look. Stay here with Naruto, Sai. I'll check in with Haku and assess the situation. As Kakashi left, Naruto found himself alone with Sai, who continued to smile in that unnerving way of his. Sometimes, Naruto wondered what Sai was really feeling behind that mask of detached politeness. He had a habit of saying the most peculiar things, and Naruto often found himself unsure how to respond. Is Haku okay? Naruto asked, hoping for more insight into her state of mind. She is a sadist, Sai answered, his tone matter-of-fact. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Sai, I didn't mean her personality. I was asking if she's alright, physically. Sai tilted his head slightly, as if the question required deep thought. Yes, he replied after a moment. Ignoring her sadistic tendencies, she is physically well. Naruto fought back a smile. It was hard to stay irritated at Sai, despite his odd responses. He knew his teammate was trying to connect, in his own strange way, and for all his social awkwardness, Sai was loyal and reliable. Just then, Naruto heard the door creak open as Haku stepped back into the room. She moved with quiet efficiency, her gaze darting around the room before landing on him. There was a subtle tension in her shoulders, a shadow in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Naruto decided it was time to take Kakashi's advice. Haku-san, he called gently, gesturing for her to join him. She crossed the room swiftly, her posture calm and collected, but Naruto could sense the underlying tension. Yes, Naruto-kun, she asked, her tone soft and controlled. Naruto hesitated, searching for the right words. Thank you, for staying by my side after the mission. I know you feel responsible for what happened, but you don't have to. You're my friend, not my bodyguard. We're a team, we protect each other. You did everything you could, and I'm grateful for it. Haku's calm expression wavered, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. She lowered her gaze, her fingers twisting together for a brief moment before she answered. Naruto-kun. I failed you. I hesitated in that fight, and because of that, you were taken. If I had been stronger, more decisive, no, Naruto interrupted firmly. You didn't fail me, Haku. You saved Sai, and you helped me as soon as I got back. We're all still here because of you. I don't want you blaming yourself for something that wasn't your fault. She looked up at him, her dark eyes searching his face, as if seeking reassurance. But I couldn't protect you. And I don't want to make that mistake again. Naruto reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. You didn't make a mistake. And you're not alone, Haku. We're in this together. Next time, we'll be ready for anything, and we'll look out for each other. You don't have to carry this alone. Haku's eyes softened, a hint of relief breaking through the shadow in her gaze. She gave a small, grateful nod, and Naruto felt a sense of warmth and connection that reminded him why he was so grateful to have her on his team. As their moment of understanding settled between them, Kakashi returned, his gaze sweeping over the group with an approving nod. Perimeter is secure, he reported. It seems we'll have some peace for the time being. Jiraiya entered behind him, arms folded, his face set in a rare expression of seriousness. He looked between Naruto, Haku, and Sai, as if assessing each of them. Finally, he sighed, the tension in his posture easing slightly. All right, brats, he said, his voice rough but not unkind. We're going to regroup and head back to the village soon. Naruto, I'll expect a full report from you when we get there. And as for your extracurricular mission, we'll have words about that later. Naruto inclined his head, bracing himself for the inevitable lecture. He knew Jiraiya wasn't pleased with his actions, and part of him dreaded the discussion that lay ahead. But another part, a small but growing part, felt a quiet satisfaction. He hadn't regretted his choices, even if they had been reckless. His friends were safe, and that was worth any scolding his godfather could deliver. As the team settled in for the night, Naruto glanced at his friends, at Sai's unflappable smile, at Haku's newfound calm, and at Kakashi's watchful eye. For the first time in a while, he felt a sense of peace. They were all battered and bruised, but they were together. And no matter what Orochimaru or anyone else threw at them, he knew they would face it as a team. But in the back of his mind, Orochimaru's words still lingered, dark and insidious, a natural-born killer, just like me. Naruto clenched his fists, steeling himself. He would prove Orochimaru wrong. He wasn't a weapon or a tool of vengeance, he was a shinobi of Konoha, and he fought for his friends. Whatever his destiny held, he would walk his path his own way, not down the dark road that Orochimaru saw for him. And with his team by his side, he knew he could face whatever lay ahead. Tsunade watched Yugao's retreating form with a thoughtful expression. She'd known Yugao by reputation for years, the quiet, disciplined ANBU operative with unmatched skill in kenjutsu, whose loyalty to the village was beyond question. But seeing her here, seeking information on Naruto, brought back memories of a different era. It was hard not to think of Kushina, fierce and radiant, who'd always had a soft spot for her students and protégés. That same warmth was flickering in Yugao's eyes, even through the controlled, professional demeanor. Tsunade couldn't help but feel a sense of comfort knowing that Naruto had someone like Yugao looking out for him. Shizune, too, had picked up on the implications of the visit. As soon as Yugao left, she leaned forward, her brow furrowed in thought. "Do you think she'll be good for him, Tsunade-sama?" she asked quietly. Tsunade took a sip of her tea, nodding slowly. "If she's anything like Kushina, then yes. Naruto could use someone who understands where he came from, especially now. He's learned a lot about his parents from Jiraiya, but he needs people who can remind him he's not alone in the world." Shizune nodded, her expression softening. She knew how much Tsunade cared about Naruto, how much she wanted to protect him from the weight of his heritage and the dangers that came with it. "And you think Yugao will help with that?" Tsunade chuckled, a small, rare smile playing on her lips. "If anyone can handle Naruto's unique personality, it's probably her. And it'll be good for him to hear stories about Kushina from someone who knew her personally. There's only so much Jiraiya and I can tell him." Shizune grinned, imagining the stories Yugao might share with Naruto. It was a side of the boy's past that he'd never had a chance to explore, a connection to the family he'd never known. "She'll be a good influence," Shizune agreed. "Naruto-kun could use someone to balance out Jiraiya-sama's, let's call it questionable guidance." Tsunade snorted. "You're not wrong there. The last thing Naruto needs is to pick up more of Jiraiya's bad habits. That boy's got enough of a mischievous streak as it is." They both laughed, the sound drawing a few curious glances from nearby tables. But their amusement was short-lived, and Tsunade's face grew serious once more as she remembered the contents of Naruto's report. She couldn't deny the skill and tactical brilliance he'd shown in his impromptu assault on Orochimaru's base. The young Uzumaki had accomplished feats that were impressive even by Chunin standards, but the ruthlessness in his methods, his calculated use of explosive seals, the traps designed to prey on the instincts of other shinobi, it was unsettling. The boy had been willing to go to extraordinary lengths to protect his team, to eliminate any threat to his friends, and while she admired his loyalty, she worried about the cold edge he was developing. "Shizune," Tsunade said after a moment, her tone more contemplative, "what do you think we should do about Naruto's darker tendencies?" Shizune glanced at her teacher, understanding the concern in her question. "Honestly? I think it's something we'll have to keep an eye on. But I don't believe he's turning cold-hearted. He has a strong sense of justice, and he's fiercely protective. He just doesn't know where to draw the line sometimes." Tsunade nodded, her gaze distant. "That's the part that worries me. Naruto's growing up in a world that demands strength and ruthlessness, but I don't want him to lose the kindness that's always been a part of him. We need to make sure he keeps that balance. Shizune reached out, giving her mentor's hand a reassuring squeeze. He's resilient, Tsunade-sama. And with people like Yugao, Kakashi, and even Haku by his side, he'll find his way. He's surrounded by people who care about him. He's not alone in this. Tsunade's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability flickering in her gaze. She'd seen too many shinobi lose themselves to the darkness, to the endless cycle of violence and vengeance. But as she thought of Naruto, with his fierce loyalty and boundless determination, she allowed herself a small glimmer of hope. He was young, but he had an indomitable spirit, and she believed that spirit would be enough to guide him through the challenges that lay ahead. As they sat in comfortable silence, Tsunade's thoughts drifted back to Yugao. She wondered what stories the ANBU operative would share with Naruto, what memories of Kushina she would bring to life. Maybe, just maybe, it would be enough to remind him of who he was, of the strength and kindness he had inherited from his mother. Let's just keep an eye on him, Tsunade murmured finally. Naruto's path is his own, but if we can help him hold on to his light, then that's what we'll do. Shizune nodded in agreement, her gaze warm. Always, Tsunade-sama. And as they finished their meal, a sense of quiet resolve settled between them. They would guide Naruto as best as they could, supporting him from the shadows if need be, while allowing him the space to grow. He would find his own way, of that they were certain. And with people like Yugao by his side, Tsunade had faith that he would become a shinobi who would not only surpass his parents but would also honor their legacy in the truest sense. As they left the cafeteria, Tsunade felt a rare sense of calm. Naruto's future was uncertain, but it was bright, and with every step he took, he was surrounded by those who believed in him. He was not alone, and perhaps that was all the difference he needed. The sound of 1,000 birds chirping, a sharp, electric hum that seemed to fill the air with an ominous charge, echoed faintly in the distance as Haku approached the cabin. She recognized it instantly as the unmistakable sound of Chidori, Kakashi's signature technique. She paused briefly, her hand instinctively reaching for a senbon in her pouch, but then relaxed. Whatever lesson Kakashi had in mind for the three unconscious missing nin, it was clear he intended to make a lasting impression. Despite her calm expression, a simmering anger lingered beneath the surface. Those three shinobi had dared to attack Naruto and the others while they were vulnerable, and the thought made her blood boil. When she'd intercepted them, something inside her had snapped, an urge she hadn't felt since her days serving under Zabuza. She'd struck swiftly, raining down a relentless barrage of senbon with uncharacteristic ferocity, ensuring they would feel every puncture, every point of pressure. Perhaps it wasn't necessary, but it had certainly been satisfying. As she entered the cabin, she saw Sai and Naruto waiting for her, both glancing up as she stepped inside. Naruto, sensing the slight edge in her demeanor, tilted his head, his bright blue eyes narrowing in curiosity. "Haku-san," he said, his voice soft but inquisitive. "Are you all right?" Haku offered him a gentle smile, the residual tension fading as she took in his concerned expression. "Yes, Naruto-kun," she replied. "The threat has been neutralized. They won't be troubling us again." Naruto gave a small nod, but his gaze lingered on her, as if sensing that something had shifted within her. She could see the gears turning in his mind, a telltale sign of his analytical nature. Naruto had a habit of observing people closely, cataloging details and analyzing behavior, something Shizune had once remarked upon. He studied people like puzzles, but he was still learning how to connect on a more emotional level. Perhaps he noticed the faint glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes, but if he did, he didn't comment on it. Instead, he simply said, "Thank you, Haku-san, for keeping us safe." There was genuine gratitude in his voice, and Haku felt her heart soften. "Of course," she replied, her tone gentle. "We're a team, Naruto-kun. It's my duty to protect you." Just as you protected me. Sai, who had been watching the exchange with his usual impassive smile, chimed in. So, Kakashi-senpai is educating the enemy, is he? There was a hint of amusement in his tone, though his expression remained unreadable. Yes, Haku said simply. He seemed quite eager to do so. Naruto raised an eyebrow, as if trying to picture Kakashi in his educator mode. He shook his head with a small, knowing smile. Those three won't know what hit them. The group settled into a quiet but comfortable silence, each of them reflecting on the recent events. For Naruto, the aftermath of his confrontation with Orochimaru's forces was still weighing on him. He hadn't fully processed the ruthlessness he'd exhibited in the base, the measures he'd taken to ensure his friend's safety. He had no regrets, exactly, but there was a lingering disquiet, a sense that he'd stepped further into the darkness than he intended. Yet looking at Haku, Sai, and Kakashi, he felt an odd comfort in knowing he wasn't alone. They understood the lengths he'd go to for them, just as they'd go to those lengths for him. Soon, Kakashi returned, his usual nonchalant demeanor intact. He strolled into the cabin, dusting off his gloved hands as if he'd just finished a minor chore. Haku noticed a faint trace of singed cloth on his fingers, the only evidence of his Chidori's deadly charge. All taken care of? Naruto asked, his tone light but his eyes curious. Kakashi gave him an eye smile, his only response a casual nod. Let's just say they've been sufficiently enlightened. Naruto didn't ask for details, and Kakashi didn't offer them. The three missing nin wouldn't be a threat again, that much was certain. There was a brief pause as Kakashi surveyed his team, his gaze lingering on each of them before he addressed them as a whole. All right, everyone, he said, his voice settling into a more serious tone. We'll be heading back to Konoha soon. Tsunade-sama is expecting a full report, so I trust you've all documented your observations and prepared any necessary medical summaries. Naruto nodded, patting the scrolls he'd organized earlier. Reports are ready, he confirmed. Kakashi's gaze softened slightly as he looked at Naruto, a hint of pride in his eye. Good work, Naruto. You all did well under difficult circumstances. I know this mission wasn't easy, but you handled yourselves admirably. Naruto's eyes widened slightly at the praise, unused to such open acknowledgement from his usually detached sensei. Haku and Sai exchanged a glance, each reflecting a quiet satisfaction that their efforts hadn't gone unnoticed. After a moment, Kakashi leaned back, crossing his arms. One more thing, he said, his tone shifting to something a bit more personal. There are going to be times when missions get complicated. When you might be tempted to act on instinct, to let your emotions lead. But remember, we're shinobi. We don't act out of revenge, and we don't put ourselves at unnecessary risk. Protecting each other is our top priority, but there are limits. Naruto's face tightened, a subtle acknowledgement of the rebuke hidden within Kakashi's words. He knew what his sensei was alluding to, understood the reminder that his actions at Orochimaru's base had pushed those boundaries. But he also felt a surge of defiance, an unwillingness to regret his choices. If he had to make the same decision again, he would, without hesitation. Understood, sensei, he replied, his tone even, though his eyes held a spark of determination. Kakashi nodded, sensing the unspoken resolve in his student's gaze. There was a fierceness in Naruto that reminded him of Minato and Kushina, a fire that could either propel him to greatness or lead him down a dangerous path. Kakashi knew he'd have to tread carefully in guiding him, helping Naruto find the balance between his natural drive to protect and the discipline of a true shinobi. As they gathered their things and prepared for the journey home, Haku approached Naruto, her voice soft but filled with a newfound warmth. Naruto-kun, she said, catching his attention. When we get back, perhaps we could train together. I have some techniques that may help you control your urges in battle. Naruto blinked, taken aback by the offer, but a small smile crept onto his face. I'd like that, Haku-san. Thank you. She returned his smile, a glimmer of relief in her eyes. This was her way of offering him support, of reassuring him that he wasn't alone in his struggles. She, too, had experienced the pull of darkness, the temptation to lose oneself in the heat of combat. If she could help Naruto navigate those waters, she would do so gladly. With the team reunited and their path clear, they began their journey back to Konoha. The forest around them was quiet, the distant hum of danger fading as they moved closer to home. As they traveled, a sense of camaraderie settled over the group, a quiet but unbreakable bond forged through shared trials and hard-won victories. Each of them carried their own burdens, their own hidden scars. But for the first time, Naruto felt a sense of peace, a conviction that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. And as they walked beneath the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees, Naruto found himself feeling hopeful. His path was uncertain, but he was no longer walking it alone. For now, that was enough. Yugao stepped out of the dimly lit bar, the murmur of the clan head's conversation still echoing in her mind. She hadn't gotten much in the way of concrete information about Naruto, but the snippets she'd gathered painted a complex picture, one that was as tragic as it was infuriating. It was clear that Naruto's life had been shaped by decisions made long before he could understand them, decisions rooted in secrecy, politics, and fear. And it was also clear that each of the clan heads sitting at the table carried their own burdens of guilt or regret over how things had turned out. Hayashi's quiet confession weighed heavily on her. Uzumaki Naruto, our greatest dishonor as a village and mine as a father. It was rare to hear Hayashi speak so openly about his own shortcomings, even more so to a kunoichi like her. But the admission had felt genuine, especially when he'd acknowledged Naruto's role in helping Hinata find her strength. For all his stoic pride, Hayashi was aware of the debt he owed to the boy who had given his daughter something he himself could not, the courage to believe in herself. Then there was Inoichi, the usually composed Yamanaka head, whose drunken ramblings hinted at a deeper sorrow. He was one of the few in Konoha who fully understood Naruto's psychological profile, and his words reflected a haunting regret, cursed to have a father that loved the village more than him, because he believed in the village that would let a no-name orphan be its leader. The will of fire. We pissed on it. His tone had been bitter, laced with a pain that suggested he'd carried this guilt for years. Yugao felt a chill as she remembered Inoichi's next words, the ones he'd said with that empty, haunted look in his eyes. If either of them were here, could come back and see what we caused, you couldn't dig the graves fast enough. The idea of Kushina Uzumaki, with her indomitable spirit and chakra chains, or Minato Namikaze, the yellow flash himself, coming back to see what had been done to their son was enough to make anyone shudder. These were two shinobi who had given everything for Konoha, who had believed so fiercely in the ideals of the village, only for that same village to turn its back on their child. And yet, Naruto had found a way to rise above it. That thought lingered as Yugao made her way through the quiet streets of Konoha, the last rays of evening light casting long shadows across the village. For all the neglect, the ostracism, and the injustices he'd endured, Naruto had grown into someone who still believed in people, who still held to a stubborn optimism that most shinobi lost by the time they were his age. Despite everything, he'd chosen friendship and loyalty over bitterness and revenge. And, as Hayashi had noted, he'd even managed to inspire change in others, Hinata, for one, but perhaps also people like Haku and Sai, who had found a sense of belonging in his presence. But as she thought back to Shizun's words in the cafeteria, another side of Naruto emerged, the side that was increasingly willing to walk into darkness if it meant protecting the people he cared about. Yugao couldn't ignore the implications of his actions in Orochimaru's base, nor could she ignore the worry in Tsunade's eyes as she and Shizun discussed Naruto's recent ruthlessness. Naruto had shown he was willing to do whatever it took to protect his friends, and while that loyalty was admirable, it was also dangerous. The will of fire, she thought, echoing Inoichi's earlier words. It was a principle that demanded loyalty, self-sacrifice, and above all, a belief in the village as a greater family. But for Naruto, the village had been a cold, unwelcoming place for so long. His loyalty was fierce, but it was personal, directed toward individuals rather than abstract ideals. What would happen, Yugao wondered, if he ever felt that his personal loyalties conflicted with the village's interests? The clan heads seemed to recognize that Naruto was on a precarious path, one that they all felt a degree of responsibility for. But what could they offer him now? Acknowledging his parentage would be a political earthquake, and while it might give Naruto a sense of belonging, it would also put an enormous target on his back. It would invite challenges from enemies within and beyond Konoha, especially with Orochimaru's interest in him. But isn't he already carrying that burden? Yugao wondered, her heart heavy. She thought of the many nights she'd watched over him as a child, when he'd played alone in the forest, blissfully unaware of the shadows that followed him. And now, here he was, growing into a formidable shinobi with friends and allies by his side, yet still fighting battles he never should have had to face alone. As she approached the ANBU headquarters, Yugao made a silent promise to herself. She would protect Naruto, not just as an operative following orders, but as someone who genuinely cared about his well-being. She'd tell him about Kushina, about the fiery, compassionate woman who had once taught her and shaped her own path as a kunoichi. Naruto deserved to know where he came from, to have something of his mother's spirit guiding him, even if only through memories. But more than that, she would be there for him as Yugao, not just as a shadow watching from afar. Hiruzen's words echoed in her mind, Naruto-kun doesn't need Kat, but perhaps he needs Yugao. She understood now what he meant. Naruto needed connections, people who could anchor him and help him find balance. He didn't need more shadows or secrets, he needed people who believed in him and who could remind him that he wasn't defined by the pain of his past. Entering the headquarters, Yugao felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would reach out to Naruto, not as a mysterious ANBU operative, but as a friend. She would tell him stories about his mother, share with him the memories she cherished, and let him know that there were people in this village who would stand by him, not out of duty, but out of love. And maybe, she thought, that would be enough to keep his flame burning, to help him stay in the light. As she prepared to make her way home, she couldn't shake the image of Naruto standing at the edge of a precipice, caught between the darkness of his past and the hope of his future. He was young, strong, and resilient, but even the strongest could falter without the right support. Yugao knew that if he ever fell, she would be there to catch him. And in her heart, she hoped that would be enough to honor Kushina's legacy, to give Naruto a family in the way that his mother would have wanted. With a final, resolute nod to herself, Yugao left the headquarters, the night sky stretching above her. Tomorrow, she would begin fulfilling that promise. Tomorrow, she would take her place in Naruto's life, not as a silent guardian, but as someone who cared about him deeply and was willing to stand by him, come what may. As the bell rang and the students shuffled back into their classrooms, Konohamaru couldn't shake the thrill of the challenge that lay before him. He'd dealt with bullies like Heike before, but this time he wanted to do something different. His Nii-chan, Naruto, always taught him to think outside the box, to be clever rather than just relying on brute strength. After all, beating Heike to a pulp was satisfying, but it clearly wasn't making the bully back down for good. Konohamaru's thoughts wandered to Naruto, who had been his inspiration in more ways than one. His Nii-chan had taught him that there were different ways to win battles, ways that didn't always require fists. He'd often watch Naruto as he thought up complicated strategies and traps, and Konohamaru wanted to prove to himself, and maybe to Naruto too, that he could be just as smart, just as resourceful. Besides, he thought with a smirk, if Naruto could take down actual enemies of Konoha with brains and determination, then surely I can deal with a brat like Heike. When classes ended for the day, Konohamaru gathered Moegi no Dan, pulling them into a secluded corner of the academy playground, away from prying eyes and teachers. "All right, listen up, you guys," he whispered conspiratorially. I've got a plan to deal with Heike, but it's going to take some time, and it'll require all of us working together. Moegi's eyes sparkled with excitement. What do you have in mind, Kono-kun? Konohamaru grinned, lowering his voice even more. We're going to make Heike's life miserable without ever laying a finger on him. By the time we're done, he won't even want to look in our direction. Udon adjusted his glasses, intrigued. What are you thinking? Pranks? Not just any pranks, Konohamaru said, feeling a thrill of excitement. We're going to make him think he's cursed, haunted, or something even worse. We're going to make him regret ever messing with us. The three of them leaned in closer, plotting in hushed tones as they came up with a series of schemes. Each prank would be subtle, nothing too obvious, but with just enough eeriness to plant seeds of fear and doubt in Heike's mind. And best of all, they'd be careful to avoid getting caught. As the trio finalized their plan, Konohamaru felt a surge of pride and excitement. This was more than just payback, it was an exercise in creativity, in strategy. It was something Naruto would approve of, something that would make his Nii-chan proud. And maybe, just maybe, it would finally make Heike think twice before picking on anyone again. That night, Konohamaru lay in bed, unable to sleep as he thought about the days to come. Tomorrow, he'd start with something small, a few missing items here, a strange note there. It would escalate slowly, so that Heike wouldn't know what hit him until it was too late. As he drifted off, his mind wandered to Naruto once more, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the older boy. Naruto was more than just his brother in spirit, he was his role model, his guide, the person who had shown him that strength could come in many forms. Konohamaru didn't just want to be Hokage, he wanted to be the kind of Hokage Naruto would respect. One who was clever, resilient, and never backed down from a challenge. And, as his Nii-chan had shown him time and again, sometimes the best battles were the ones fought in the shadows, with a clever mind and a determined heart. The next day, Heike found himself in for a series of surprises. His favorite pencil was missing, his desk drawer was filled with itching powder, and a strange, ominous note had been tucked into his lunchbox. By the time lunch came around, he was scratching furiously, looking over his shoulder, and muttering under his breath about curses and ghosts. Konohamaru watched from a distance, hiding his grin behind his bento box as he and his friends stifled their laughter. Moegi leaned over, whispering, "Kono-kun, this is genius." Udon nodded in agreement, adjusting his glasses. "You're going to make him think twice before he ever messes with us again." Konohamaru chuckled, feeling a thrill of victory. This was only the beginning, and with each passing day, he would up the ante, a little more each time. He wasn't sure how long it would take, but he knew one thing for certain: by the time he was done, Heike would be too spooked to ever lay a finger on anyone in their class. Again. "This is for you, Nii-chan," he thought with a smile, already planning his next move. And as he walked home that evening, the young Sarutobi felt a newfound confidence. He was on his way to becoming someone worthy of the title he aspired to, someone who could make Naruto, his Nii-chan, proud. The days that followed were filled with quiet, cunning chaos. Konohamaru had carefully orchestrated each incident so that it would feel like a haunting, strange, unsettling, and entirely untraceable. He took inspiration from the stories he'd heard from Naruto about stealth operations and the way shinobi could manipulate their environment to create fear without ever being seen. It started with little things. Every morning, Heike would arrive to find something off in his desk. One day, his entire supply of pencils had been mysteriously snapped in half. The next, he found his eraser covered in ink that stained his fingers black for hours. Small pranks, harmless really, but enough to unsettle him. Then, Konohamaru added little touches to build the atmosphere, ominous notes with vague warnings, small symbols that he'd scribbled in red ink and hidden in Heike's notebook. Konohamaru didn't know what they meant, but he figured Heike wouldn't either, and that was the point. Heike tried to brush it off at first, but the pranks escalated. One day, as Heike reached into his desk, he found it filled with cold, slimy frogs. He screamed and leaped back, drawing the attention of half the class as he stumbled over his own feet, pale and trembling. He glanced around, searching for the culprit, but no one looked his way. Konohamaru and his friends were calmly sitting at their desks, as if nothing had happened. "Did you see his face?" Moegi whispered with a grin as they huddled during lunch. "Totally priceless," Udon agreed, chuckling behind his glasses. "He looked like he'd seen a ghost." Konohamaru grinned, a mischievous glint in his eye. "We're just getting started. The next phase begins tomorrow." The next day, Konohamaru ramped up the haunting. He arranged for little things to go wrong in every part of Heike's day. First, Heike's locker was somehow filled with smoke bombs, a harmless but disorienting prank that left him coughing and covered in soot. Then, during lunch, his food somehow mysteriously went missing. By the time he found it, someone had drawn strange symbols all over his bento box, making it look like a cursed artifact. By this point, Heike was visibly on edge. He started looking over his shoulder in the hallways, jumping at the slightest sound. His lackeys, who had initially found the pranks amusing, were now wary themselves. No one could explain what was happening, and that made it worse. Konohamaru watched with satisfaction. He didn't need to fight Heike, he just needed to show him that messing with people had consequences. A week into the haunting, Heike was a nervous wreck. He was twitchy, barely able to focus, and his confidence had evaporated. Konohamaru decided it was time for the grand finale, something that would stick in Heike's mind and make him think twice before bullying anyone again. He waited until the end of the day, just as the sun was setting and casting long shadows across the academy grounds. The students were heading home, but Konohamaru had other plans. He and Moegi and Udon snuck into the small grove of trees behind the academy, hiding among the shadows as they waited for Heike and his lackeys to pass by. "Ready?" Konohamaru whispered, his voice barely audible. Moegi and Udon nodded, their eyes gleaming with excitement. They knew the plan and had practiced it meticulously. They each had a role to play, and everything had to go perfectly for the final effect. As Heike and his friends passed the grove, Konohamaru gave the signal. Moegi threw a small smoke bomb to the ground, enveloping the area in a swirling mist. Heike froze, startled, as the smoke seemed to come from nowhere. "Who's there?" he stammered, his voice trembling. Konohamaru stayed silent, letting the eerie atmosphere build. Then, he whispered just loud enough for it to carry through the mist. "Heike. Heike, why do you bully the weak?" Heike spun around, his face pale as he tried to locate the source of the voice. Who's saying that?" Konohamaru motioned to Udon, who had prepared a piece of paper covered in the same strange symbols they'd used before. With a flick of his wrist, Udon threw it so it landed at Heike's feet. Heike looked down, and his eyes widened in horror as he recognized the cursed symbol. He backed away, shaking his head. No, this can't be happening." Konohamaru and his friends remained hidden, their movements swift and silent. They rustled leaves, whispered his name, and made strange sounds from the shadows, creating the illusion that Heike was surrounded by unseen spirits. It was simple misdirection, but in Heike's panicked mind, it became a full-blown nightmare. Finally, as Heike stumbled backward, Konohamaru decided it was time to end it. He stepped out from behind the tree, his face shadowed by the fading light, giving him an intimidating appearance. He narrowed his eyes, looking down at Heike with an expression of calm disdain. "Heike," Konohamaru said, his voice low and steady. "This is your last warning. Pick on anyone again, and the curse will come back. But next time, it'll be worse." Heike's eyes were wide with terror. He opened his mouth to protest, to deny that he was afraid, but his voice came out as a strangled whimper. He turned and bolted, his lackeys scrambling to keep up as they ran down the path, disappearing into the twilight. As soon as they were out of sight, Konohamaru let out a deep breath and grinned, feeling a surge of victory. Moegi and Udon emerged from the shadows, their faces lit up with excitement. "That was amazing, Kono-kun," Moegi whispered, still giggling. "You were so scary." Udon nodded, pushing up his glasses. "I don't think he'll be messing with anyone for a long time." Konohamaru's grin widened. "That's the plan. It's like my Nii-chan always says, you don't have to be the strongest to win. Sometimes you just have to be the smartest." As the trio made their way home, Konohamaru felt a deep sense of pride. He'd protected his classmates, stood up to a bully, and done it all without breaking a single rule, or leaving any evidence that could trace back to him. It was exactly the kind of clever, outside-the-box thinking Naruto had taught him, and he couldn't wait to tell his Nii-chan all about it when he got back. A few days later, when Naruto finally returned to the village, he was greeted by a very excited Konohamaru, who dragged him to a secluded training ground before he could even say hello to anyone else. "Ni-chan," Konohamaru said, practically bouncing with excitement. "You won't believe what I did while you were gone." Naruto chuckled, ruffling the younger boy's hair. "Alright, spill it. What's got you so fired up, Kono-chan?" Konohamaru launched into the story, detailing every prank, every trick, every whisper in the shadows. Naruto listened with rapt attention, a proud smile spreading across his face as he heard how his little brother had outwitted his bully. When Konohamaru finished, Naruto crouched down, looking him in the eye. "You did all that without getting caught? That's pretty impressive, Kono-chan. You made me proud." Konohamaru beamed, his chest puffing up with pride at Naruto's praise. "You really think so?" Naruto nodded. "Absolutely. You stood up for what was right, and you did it smart. You didn't just fight him, you outsmarted him. That's something even seasoned shinobi struggle with." Konohamaru's grin widened, feeling a sense of accomplishment he'd never felt before. "One day, I'm going to be a shinobi just like you, Nii-chan. And then I'll protect everyone in Konoha." Naruto's expression softened, his eyes gleaming with warmth. He placed a hand on Konohamaru's shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "I have no doubt you will, Kono-chan. You're going to be a great shinobi, and maybe even the Hokage someday." Konohamaru's eyes shone with determination. "Believe it." Naruto chuckled, recognizing his own words echoed back at him. With one final ruffle of Konohamaru's hair, he stood up, feeling a deep sense of pride and hope. Konohamaru had a long way to go, but with a heart like his, Naruto knew the future of Konoha was in good hands. In the bustling streets of a small village, Jiraiya surveyed his makeshift team with a mix of pride and exasperation. Ever since his attempts to lecture Naruto on proper behavior had failed, he'd opted for a new approach: grueling, relentless training. Morning, noon, and night, he worked his godson and his two teammates, Haku and Sai, pushing them to their limits with physical exercises, chakra control drills, and sparring sessions. He was determined to drill a lesson into Naruto, to show him the consequences of defiance and disrespect. Yet, to Jiraiya's mounting frustration, none of them, Naruto especially, showed any sign of discomfort. No complaints, no exhaustion, not even a grunt of frustration. All his intense training seemed to do was make them stronger, faster, sharper. The little brats. Still, he couldn't deny a swelling sense of pride as he watched them grow, especially Naruto. Though this was only a temporary team, it reminded him of his own genin days, sparking a bittersweet nostalgia without the usual pangs of regret. As they strolled through the village, Jiraiya gave his final instructions, telling them he'd secure rooms at the inn and reminding Naruto to keep a low profile around the Suna shinobi they were escorting to Konoha. Naruto simply nodded, his expression as unreadable as ever. Meeting the Kazekage's children and their Jounin sensei, Baki, at the border had been uneventful for Jiraiya, though he'd noted Baki's stiffness and the eerie intensity of the youngest child, Gaara. But Baki was privately a bundle of nerves. He'd expected a simple escort mission to the Chunin exams, not the company of one of Konoha's legendary Sannin. The sight of Jiraiya made his blood run cold, and he couldn't shake the feeling that Suna's planned betrayal had somehow been exposed. With Jiraiya as their escort, Baki felt as if he were walking a razor's edge. If Gaara lost control and provoked the Toad Sage, there would be nothing Baki could do to prevent a bloodbath. He could only hope that he'd survive the exams, and the inevitable chaos to come, so he could reward himself with a long, isolated vacation far from Konoha. While Jiraiya and Baki moved ahead, the young shinobi were left to their own devices. Haku suggested finding an early dinner, and Kankuro eagerly offered to accompany her. Naruto couldn't quite place why he found Kankuro's enthusiasm odd, but he tucked the observation away. Sai, meanwhile, vanished, off to pursue whatever secretive task might occupy a young shinobi under Danzo's watchful eye. Naruto, meanwhile, had his own mission in mind. Spying a local woman, he approached her with a polite, "Excuse me, ma'am," and asked for directions to a nearby bookstore and a place to buy a trinket for a 9-year-old boy. The woman stiffened at the sight of his headband, but her face softened as she pointed him in the right direction. However, Naruto soon realized he wasn't alone. The eldest Suna sibling, Temari, was following him. She met his gaze with a teasing grin. "So you do speak?" I was starting to wonder. Naruto's response was level, practical. "If you wanted to speak to me, Temari-san, you could have simply spoken to me." Temari flushed slightly, taken off guard by his straightforwardness. Trying to regain her composure, she asked where he was going, and Naruto explained his search for a book and a gift for his little brother. Temari was struck by his thoughtfulness. It wasn't often a shinobi on a mission. Took time to consider family, especially at such a young age. But as she watched him peruse the items in the shop, she grew intrigued by his intensity. He seemed to be carefully weighing each trinket, dismissing anything that didn't meet his precise, though unspoken, standards. When he finally settled on a pair of midnight blue goggles, she couldn't help but wonder at his choice, but she kept her questions to herself. Following him to the bookstore, Temari was even more surprised when Naruto headed straight for the self-help and relationship section. Unable to contain her curiosity, she asked, "Are you in the right section?" Without breaking his gaze from the shelves, Naruto replied simply, "Yes." "What could you possibly need from this section?" she pressed, her voice filled with bemusement. Naruto turned to look at her with his steady, blue-eyed stare. "I received a kiss from a friend recently but am not sure why or how to gain another. I seek information to that end." His words left Temari speechless, and Naruto took her silence as understanding, returning to his search. Inwardly, however, Temari fumed. Here she was, years older and with no romantic experiences of her own, while this 12-year-old boy had already been kissed by someone. Determined to reclaim her dignity, she tried to dismiss his concern. "Maybe you're reading too much into it. One of your little friends got crazy and gave you a peck. It's not that big a deal." "You're what, 12? "Yes, I am 12, Naruto replied without turning. "Haku is 15. Even by your logic, her actions would be more considered than my own." He didn't see Temari's irritated flush at the mention of Haku, a beautiful, skilled kunoichi, giving Naruto a kiss. The idea both frustrated and intrigued her. Finally, in a last-ditch effort to advise him, Temari suggested, "Why not just ask her to be your girlfriend? Seems simple enough unless you're afraid." Naruto considered this thoughtfully as he picked a book from the shelf. "If I ask Haku to be my girlfriend, it would be inappropriate to receive kisses from other people, and yet there are multiple girls I would like to eventually kiss. I simply want Haku to kiss me, too." Temari nearly stumbled as she absorbed his casual admission. She could hardly believe his audacity, though there was a strange honesty to it. No pretensions, just a straightforward statement of what he wanted. Annoyed and intrigued, she followed him out of the store, trying to make sense of the enigmatic boy beside her. Trying to change the subject, she asked if he was an heir of some sort, maybe that would explain his self-assuredness. Naruto's answer, that his parents had died young and left him an inheritance, surprised her, and she offered a quick apology, not wanting to dredge up painful memories. But Naruto brushed it off, explaining he'd had years to accept their deaths. Feeling a little more at ease, Temari asked if his little brother was biological, assuming he'd been adopted. But Naruto corrected her, saying his brother was not by blood, nor had he ever been adopted. Realizing how many assumptions she'd made, Temari muttered that she must look like an idiot, feeling embarrassed by her constant missteps in the conversation. Naruto looked her over thoughtfully, as if considering her words. Then, in a genuine attempt to understand, he asked, "Oh, how have you embarrassed yourself? Did the breeze catch your skirt?" Temari's face flared bright red, and she sputtered, "No, you pervert. Why would that be your guess?" Naruto blinked, genuinely puzzled. "I could see no other reason for your embarrassment, and many would be if strangers saw their panties. Or proof they weren't wearing any." Temari's shock turned into flustered rage as she shot back, "Of course I'm wearing panties." But Naruto barely registered her response as he resumed walking, deep in thought. Her words had made him question one of Hinata's claims about kunoichi, and he resolved to investigate later, musing on the strange interactions and complexities of relationships. As Temari followed behind him, she found herself both exasperated and strangely charmed by this odd, straightforward boy from Konoha. Despite his bluntness, Naruto had a sincerity that made it hard to stay annoyed at him. Little did she realize, their brief exchange had left its own subtle impression on her, planting the seeds of curiosity that would linger long after they'd parted ways. Naruto's thoughts were still on his dilemma as he and Temari made their way to a small tavern, where they found the rest of their teams already seated. Temari, still flustered from their earlier conversation, didn't even think to ask how Naruto had known to come here. Instead, her attention drifted to her brother, Kankuro, who looked uncharacteristically glum. The siblings exchanged glances, each immediately asking, "What's wrong with you?" They both answered at once, "I'll tell you later," and went quiet. As dinner unfolded, Naruto remained silent, lost in his musings, while Haku quietly made sure to get takeout for the others who hadn't joined them. It was a peaceful meal, though the undercurrents of each person's private thoughts and concerns lingered in the air. Afterward, they all made their way back to the inn. Once they checked in with Jiraiya, Naruto slipped away to the roof with his new book, not wanting Haku to see what he'd bought. Sai followed him, setting up his art supplies nearby, using the quiet to work on his own secretive project. In the shared room below, Haku stayed behind, while Temari and Kankuro retired to their own room, with Gaara sitting in silence, staring at nothing in particular. When Temari finally confronted Kankuro in private, she didn't hide her irritation. "Okay, we're alone now. What happened?" Kankuro sighed, clearly nursing a bruised ego. "The leaf kunoichi. I was giving her my grade A material, my best lines, and she just turned me down flat." "You're upset because a girl you just met didn't fall for your crappy pickup lines? Seriously?" Temari's tone was disbelieving, though an undercurrent of amusement crept into her voice. "She's so hot," Kankuro said defensively, and Temari rolled her eyes. "She's somewhat attractive, sure," she said, though inwardly she knew she was downplaying her impression of Haku. The girl was beautiful, ethereal even. Temari wasn't sure why she felt compelled to downplay it now. Kankuro's face took on a dreamy look. "She's a smoke show, and that's a fact. Temari, I'm in love." A cold voice cut through the conversation, and both siblings froze as Gaara spoke up. "You're both annoying." Temari stiffened, feeling a familiar spike of fear as Gaara's cold gaze flicked between them. She knew he'd love nothing more than to lash out, to threaten or even kill them just to silence their chatter. But ever since they'd set out on this journey, Gaara had been, restrained, almost wary. Jiraiya's presence, she realized, had put him on edge. Baki's warnings about the Toad Sage's lethal power must have had an impact, though Gaara would never admit it. After a tense moment, Gaara rose and left the room, heading for the roof to find solitude. But when he arrived, he found Naruto and Sai already there, each absorbed in their own world, Naruto reading, Sai quietly painting. Naruto was still mulling over his own dilemma, feeling frustrated by the philosophical tangles that came with his quest for understanding relationships. Sai, ever the pragmatist, spoke up as he added finishing touches to his painting. "Couldn't you just ask Haku for another kiss?" he suggested, his tone genuinely curious. Naruto shook his head, eyes still on the pages of his book. "I considered it, but it seems indelicate. Like asking someone if they want to have sex someday. It's too direct, feels cumbersome." Sai pondered this, tilting his head thoughtfully. "Are you concerned about rejection? Was her willingness to kiss you the first time important to your enjoyment?" Naruto considered this, though his answer came quickly. "I suppose it might be. The spontaneity was part of the experience, but I don't have enough data to be certain. Either way, I want her to want to kiss me again. Not just because I asked." Sai studied him for a moment, mildly baffled by his friend's interest in romance. For Sai, matters of affection seemed like needless complications. "Are you sure it's worth the trouble?" he asked, honestly curious. "I would be vehement in my assurance that it is," Naruto replied with a small, resolute grin. Neither he nor Sai seemed bothered when Gaara approached, though the redhead didn't seem interested in conversation at first. He merely sat in a corner, watching them in silence as the late evening settled into night. But the silence didn't last long. Gaara's gaze fell on Naruto, and an odd question emerged, blunt and unsettling. "Why do you feel empty?" Naruto looked up from his book, surprised. "I don't know what that means," he answered, unsure what Gaara was getting at. The redhead's eyes narrowed. "You have no emotions. Not once, in all the time you've been in my presence, have you shown any. Is this a trick by my father to lower my guard? If so, it will not work." Naruto blinked, then shrugged. "I thought shinobi weren't supposed to show emotions. Logically, if everyone around you does, then they must be inferior. Shouldn't your question be why they emote, not why I don't?" His voice was calm, practical, his tone dismissing the implication that Gaara's paranoia mattered to him. "And for the record, I don't take orders from anyone in Suna. My job is to get you to Konoha unharmed. The state of your guard is your concern." Gaara's brow furrowed, thrown off by Naruto's straightforward rebuttal. He wasn't used to people responding so rationally to his aggression, most either cowered or retaliated. The calm in Naruto's voice unsettled him, but he refused to back down. Trying to find something to criticize, he zeroed in on the book Naruto was reading. "Why do you read such drivel?" he sneered. Naruto glanced at the cover, then back at Gaara. "I'm seeking information I don't currently have. Have you read this book? What makes it drivel?" Gaara scoffed, though he was caught off guard once again. "Of course not. I have no need. I love only myself, and I kill all threats to my existence. That's the only validation I need." Naruto paused, then asked, "How do you know you aren't just a brain in a vat?" Gaara blinked, uncomprehending. "What?" "If you isolate yourself," Naruto explained, "how do you know all of reality is real? You could be a brain in a vat, dreaming this whole world. Or maybe it's a complex genjutsu. In that case, you'd just be killing imaginary people. So you wouldn't be validating anything real. The words sank into Gaara like stones dropped in deep water. He stared at Naruto, speechless, as his worldview shifted beneath him. What did it mean to validate his existence? Could he even be sure this existence was real? Doubt seeped into him like poison, and for the first time in his life, he felt unmoored, uncertain. With a haunted look, he stumbled away, retreating back to his room, his mind swirling with questions he'd never thought to ask before. As he entered the room, Kankuro and Temari looked up, startled by the strange, vulnerable expression on their brother's face. Gaara's voice was barely a whisper as he asked, "Am I real?" Temari and Kankuro exchanged worried glances, unprepared for the soft, fractured question. Gaara, their unpredictable, violent brother, was asking something that bordered on pleading. Neither knew how to respond. Meanwhile, on the roof, Naruto barely spared a thought for Gaara's exit. He, too, found philosophy tedious, often more trouble than it was worth. He remembered a similar conversation with his Ajizan, who had once posed the same question about reality to him. After days of consideration, Naruto had answered that whether this world was real or an illusion was irrelevant, since it was real to him. It was a satisfactory answer for his own peace of mind. But tonight, his mind remained on a different kind of puzzle, one far less abstract, the mystery of affection. How did you kindle warmth in someone else's heart? How did you get them to want to share that warmth with you, again and again? He frowned at the open book in his lap, its words dense and unsatisfying. It was no easy answer, no clear-cut philosophy to embrace. As he pondered, a chill breeze swept over the rooftop, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth. He wondered if Haku, somewhere below, could feel it too. His fingers brushed the page, but his thoughts drifted far away, imagining a world in which understanding emotions could be as straightforward as a sparring match, as simple as learning a new jutsu. But until he could grasp the nuances of human affection, Naruto would keep reading, keep searching, and, perhaps, keep surprising others along the way, especially himself. As the Chunin exams approached, a sense of anticipation, and, for some, unease, spread among Konoha's rookie teams. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Hokage, had just finished a meeting with the Jounin sensei, approving nominations for this year's exams. It was clear to him that these young genin had progressed significantly, each of them bearing strengths and weaknesses that the exam would lay bare. As he watched the Jounin file out, his mind lingered on the faces of his grandson Naruto and the other rookies who would be taking on this challenge. Among the Jounin, Kakashi's arrival had been the most surprising. Normally known for his chronic tardiness, today he'd arrived early, his demeanor subtly changed. Hiruzen knew what lay behind that shift. Naruto's initial report, and Tsunade's subsequent diagnosis, had uncovered the extent of Kakashi's struggles with depression, something that had affected him since his days as a young ninja. The Sannin had berated Konoha's medical staff for their lack of diligence, swiftly implementing a program to ensure all medical personnel were trained in psychiatric care. With treatment, Kakashi was beginning to emerge from the fog of grief and loss he'd lived with for years. Now, the once distant sensei was slowly reintegrating himself into Konoha's social fabric, training more, spending time with his fellow Jounin, and even, finally, stepping away from the memorial stone where he'd spent so many hours in silent mourning. After the meeting, Hiruzen called Kakashi to stay behind. The Hokage's gaze softened as he informed him that Naruto would be returning today to rejoin Team 7 for the exams. Kakashi inclined his head. "Understood, Hokage-sama. I doubt my whole team will show up," he said, a touch of humor in his voice. Hiruzen chuckled, though his expression grew serious once more. "There's one more thing, Kakashi. I'm considering pulling Naruto from Team 7 permanently after the exams." Kakashi's visible eye widened slightly. "With all due respect, Hokage-sama, I don't think that's necessary. The team's cohesion isn't perfect, but they have potential. Given time, Naruto could lead them as a Chunin, while I step back to another role." Hiruzen sighed, resting his hands on his desk. I understand, and it gives me no pleasure to make this decision. But with Orochimaru's interest in Sasuke and the Akatsuki targeting Naruto, it may be too dangerous to keep them together. Both of them are prime targets, especially as Naruto's heritage becomes more widely known. Kakashi's jaw tightened. I'd die before I let anything happen to them. The Hokage nodded, his voice kind but firm. I know. But, Kakashi, your task is to look for reasons to live, not die. Not until you're old and can go peacefully, surrounded by those who care about you. That's a good death. Kakashi held Hiruzen's gaze, the words settling heavily within him. After a pause, he nodded, accepting the advice, though a part of him still hoped he could keep Team 7 together. He saluted and left, deep in thought. Across the village, the rookie teams were receiving similar news. Kurenai Yuhi, Jounin sensei of Team 8, met her students at their training grounds, handing them their forms for the Chunin exams. Kiba, always the outspoken one, let out a whoop of excitement. You think we're ready to be Chunin? He asked, his eyes bright. Kurenai smiled, prepared for this question. Do I think you're ready for all the responsibilities of a Chunin? No. Most people aren't fully prepared when they first take on the role. But I do believe you each have some of the skills necessary to survive and excel. This will be an opportunity to grow, and I wouldn't have nominated you if I didn't believe in your potential. Kiba grinned, bolstered by her confidence. Beside him, Hinata and Shino listened attentively, each of them feeling their own mix of excitement and trepidation. Kurenai gave them a week to decide, reminding them that other rookie teams, along with Team 9 under Mato Guy, had also been nominated. As she departed, her students exchanged glances, a sense of shared determination settling over them. At another training ground, Asuma Sarutobi approached his own team, watching with amusement as Ino performed sit-ups from a tree branch, her dedication visible in every movement. Her transformation had surprised him, he hadn't expected her to develop such grit and resilience in so short a time. Though he knew that, on paper, Team 10 was the weakest in terms of raw combat strength, he hoped that their teamwork would carry them through. You've been nominated for the Chunin exams, he announced, passing out their forms. Shikamaru, ever the reluctant ninja, sighed. Troublesome. Do we have to? Asuma shook his head, smiling. No. This is optional. But consider it an honor, especially for rookies. Team activities are suspended for the time being. So think it over. As Asuma departed, Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji exchanged looks. Despite Shikamaru's typical complaints, there was a glint of interest in his eyes. They knew the exams would test them in ways they hadn't been tested before, and each of them felt a flicker of curiosity about how they'd measure up. Meanwhile, back with Team 7, Kakashi's announcement was met with mixed reactions. Sasuke barely looked up when Kakashi informed them that Naruto would be rejoining them for the exams. For the Uchiha, a promotion was only a nominal benefit. What mattered to him was the challenge, the chance to test himself, to see if he'd improved enough to close the gap between himself and Naruto. The time as a genin had humbled him, not only had Naruto outshined him, but Sasuke had come face to face with his own limitations. He'd almost died protecting his teammates, a choice that hadn't surprised him but had revealed the stark reality of his weakness. The Chunin exams, he knew, would be an opportunity to grow stronger, something he desperately needed if he was ever going to face his brother Itachi. Sakura, on the other hand, felt an odd sense of relief when Kakashi confirmed that Naruto would be taking the exams with them. Without him, she doubted she'd have had the confidence to try, but the thought of having her full team with her made her feel braver, more capable. As she reflected on the two boys she trained alongside, she found herself realizing that her motivations had shifted. She still admired Sasuke, but she was beginning to understand that his approach to life, to face every challenge head-on, relying on raw strength, left little room for error or vulnerability. If you weren't at his level, you could easily be left behind, out of your depth. Naruto, by contrast, seemed to approach challenges with a different mentality. He analyzed situations, broke down problems, and found ways to adapt. He didn't seek every opportunity to prove his strength. Instead, he sought the greatest advantage, working around obstacles rather than plowing straight through them. With Naruto, she felt safer. Like there was always a plan. He wouldn't abandon her or risk his life recklessly. Sasuke might die to protect her, but Naruto would do everything in his power to avoid such a scenario. And that thought was comforting. Sakura glanced at Sasuke, wondering if he'd ever be willing to follow Naruto's lead, to let someone else take charge if it meant better odds of survival. She wasn't sure. But she hoped she'd have the courage to stand by Naruto if it came to that. Baki, hardened veteran and top man of Suna, stood in the Jounin lounge, overlooking the arena where the first stage of the Chunin exams would soon begin. He folded his arms, attempting to project the calm confidence expected of him, but inwardly he was a storm of frayed nerves and restless dread. The past week had been nothing short of a mental battleground, only, it wasn't the kind of combat he'd trained. His Team 4. Psychological warfare, deft and insidious, had infiltrated his ranks, turning his students into strangers even he barely recognized. He cursed himself for underestimating Konoha, for seeing it as the soft village instead of what it truly was, a web of manipulation and intrigue, perfectly designed to ensnare its enemies. He'd started this mission with one primary concern, Jiraiya, the Toad Sage. But now it was the blonde genin, Naruto Uzumaki, who haunted him like a specter. Somehow, in just days, that boy had gotten into the heads of all three of his students, unraveling them in ways Baki hadn't thought possible. It began with Gaara. One conversation with Naruto, mind you, and Baki's terrifyingly unstable Jinchuriki had transformed from a violent sociopath into a full-blown nihilist. The change had been abrupt and chilling. Gaara had woken Baki in the dead of night, eyes wild and desperate, rambling about how God was dead and how they were all collectively responsible for his murder. Baki hadn't even known Gaara believed in God, much less that he could be talked into philosophical existentialism. But Naruto's words had planted some dreadful seed in Gaara's mind, and now the boy was convinced that life was an empty, meaningless void. The once lethal certainty of Gaara's rage had been replaced with a hollow despair. For a moment, Baki wondered if this was better or worse. Then there was Kankuro. His once cocksure student was now a shell of his former self, trapped in a spiral of unrequited infatuation with the Konoha kunoichi, Haku. It was a bizarre, almost farcical situation. Haku had somehow managed to capture Kankuro's interest without even trying, without even glancing his way. She was, in Baki's mind, the most effective honeypot in the history of shinobi espionage, even if she hadn't set out to be one. Kankuro would stare at her, then at Naruto, and mutter in denial, as if he couldn't comprehend how his object of affection could hold any interest in the quiet, intense blonde. Baki had tried to dissuade him, reminding him that he should be gathering intel on potential threats in the exams, not mooning over a kunoichi who clearly couldn't care less. But Kankuro's pride had been dented, his confidence shaken. Whatever strange allure Naruto seemed to hold over the people around him, Kankuro had fallen victim just as surely as Gaara. But the final blow came with Temari, his most steadfast, level-headed student. Baki had thought she was immune to Naruto's influence. She was strong, resilient, her will as solid as steel. But even she had faltered, ensnared by the subtle manipulations of the little demon. Naruto had invited her, casually, to spend time together if she found herself with free time during the exams, and Temari had blushed. She'd looked to Haku, as if for permission, only to be met with a serene, infuriating smile, one that said Haku didn't even consider her a threat. Baki had seen that look before, the one that spoke of unspoken insecurities, the hidden yearning of someone who'd always felt isolated, always wondered if they were truly wanted. In that moment, Temari's composed facade had cracked, and Baki knew she'd fallen prey to Naruto's quiet charisma. And if that weren't enough, Konohamaru's arrival, the boy diving into Naruto's arms, calling him Ni-chan, had struck Temari right in her softest spot. She watched Naruto interact with the child, her eyes wistful, her expression betraying her own complicated feelings about her bond with Gaara. The little brat had weaponized Temari's unspoken longing for family connection against her, and she didn't even realize it. But the final straw, the moment when Baki knew he was truly out of his depth, came just a few days later. Gaara, for the first time in his life, had come to him with a question, an urgent one, whispered as he held up a tattered orange book. "Sensei," he had asked, voice wavering. "Can we have the talk?" Baki had nearly fainted on the spot. And so he stood here now, weary, bleary-eyed, and feeling utterly defeated. He'd spent sleepless nights trying to undo the damage, trying to bring his students back to their senses. But with each attempt, it became clear that the bonds Naruto had created, or disrupted, were not so easily broken. He'd started smoking again, the first time in over 10 years, just to cope with the relentless anxiety of it all. The fact that Tsunade Senju was also back in the village, one of the most fearsome Sannin, with a notorious hatred of Suna Shinobi, was almost enough to make him abandon the mission altogether. In the dead of night, he'd even considered going rogue, escaping to some far-off land where Konoha's long reach couldn't find him. But he was Suna's top man, and his loyalty, despite everything, remained unshaken. As he watched his students file into the exam hall, Baki's heart sank. Temari had put on a faint touch of makeup and wore a carefully chosen outfit, clearly designed to catch Naruto's eye. Kankuro, meanwhile, seemed restless, scanning the crowd as if hoping for some glimpse of Haku that might reassure him she hadn't completely dismissed him. And Gaara. Gaara walked with an eerie calm, his eyes blank and cold, as if the entire world around him were nothing more than shadows flickering on a wall. Baki sighed, lighting another cigarette and closing his eyes as the smoke filled his lungs. The irony was bitter. He was supposed to be leading the vanguard of an invasion, but he felt like he'd already lost a battle before the exams had even begun. His students had been mindfucked 2 ways from Sunday, leaving him to wonder if the actual invasion would be less stressful than this psychological nightmare. At least, he thought, it can't get much worse. And yet, somewhere deep inside, he knew that this was just the beginning. Kakashi stood over his team, feeling an odd mix of pride and nostalgia. It was strange, he'd trained them for months, been on missions with them, watched them stumble and grow and argue. But somehow, in this moment, as they prepared to enter the Chunin exams, it was as if he were seeing them clearly for the first time. His gaze fell first on Sakura. She was the normal one, or at least that's how people saw her. Cursed to be the ordinary kunoichi on a team of unusuals, Sakura sometimes seemed to believe it herself. But Kakashi could see what she couldn't yet. Underneath her insecurities and that often tentative self-image was a mind as sharp as a kunai and a resolve as steady as steel. She'd shown her resilience on their more dangerous missions, facing down fear and holding her ground even when she thought she was out of her depth. If she could just find her path, find what she wanted, there was no telling how high she could go. He hoped these exams would help her see what he saw, a girl on the verge of greatness, waiting for her chance to step into it. Then there was Sasuke. The prodigy, the heir, the boy who carried his clan's pride and burden on his shoulders. Many believed Sasuke was meant to outshine his teammates, to stand above them as the natural leader, the one whose talent set him apart. Kakashi knew that, deep down, even Sasuke believed it too. And in many ways, it was true. The Sharingan wielder had an intellect and natural ability that couldn't be denied. He was fast, strong, focused, with a drive that came from a place few could understand, a singular, burning need for vengeance. But bit by bit, Kakashi had been trying to pull him away from that all-consuming obsession, to help him find his own strength and purpose beyond Itachi. He could see flashes of progress in Sasuke, small moments where the boy's guarded heart would soften, just a little, toward his teammates. He wasn't there yet, not by a long shot. But these exams might just push him another step along that road. And then, there was Naruto. Kakashi couldn't help but smile under his mask as he looked at the blonde ball of energy that was his third student. Naruto was the odd one out in every sense, a goofball, an outsider, Konoha's demon fox, who wore his loneliness with a grin. But Kakashi knew better. This kid was something special, something more. If Sakura and Sasuke each had the potential for greatness, then Naruto was something beyond potential. He was like a spark waiting to catch flame. Kakashi knew that if he could just guide that spark, stoke it in the right direction, it would grow into a fire that could illuminate the whole village, and maybe even beyond. But it was more than that. Over these months, Naruto had come to be more than just his student. Kakashi saw shades of his old team in this boy, and even more so, shades of his beloved sensei. Naruto wasn't just the chosen one, some distant, impersonal title given by fate. No, Naruto was Chibi, the kid with a never-ending grin, a strange sense of humor, and a heart so wide it somehow found room for everyone. Kakashi couldn't help but want to be there, to watch as Naruto reached for his dreams, to teach him everything Minato-sensei had taught him and maybe a few things that, well, might be more questionable. Once Naruto made Chunin, Kakashi had so many plans. He'd show him all the coolest tricks, from techniques that would let him vanish in a crowded room to the finer, well, life skills Minato-sensei had passed on to him, like how to remove a bra with only your teeth. Not that Naruto needed to know that now, of course, but, well, it was part of a well-rounded education, wasn't it? In truth, Kakashi knew he probably shouldn't be training Genin at all. His years in ANBU had warped him, twisted his sense of normalcy in ways he barely recognized. But Naruto got him. Somehow, the kid understood him better than he'd have thought possible. And if this was to be their last hurrah as a team before everything changed, then he was glad he'd managed to leave his mark. The Hokage had approved his suggestion to modify Naruto's uniform, just a little, a subtle addition that bore Kakashi's influence. When Naruto stepped into those exams, everyone would know that he was Hatake Kakashi's student. It was a small thing, but it mattered. As he stood there, watching his team with an uncharacteristic softness in his gaze, he realized they were all looking up at him, expectant, as if waiting for some kind of grand speech. He cleared his throat. He supposed he should give them some kind of pep talk, something inspiring to send them into the exams with confidence and courage. And yet, as the words formed on his tongue, all he could manage was, "Don't embarrass me." Sakura rolled her eyes, looking unimpressed, while Sasuke huffed in annoyance. But Naruto chuckled, blue eyes sparkling with amusement. He got it, in a way the others didn't. That was the thing about Chibi. He just got it. Feeling uncharacteristically sentimental, Kakashi reached out and ruffled Naruto's hair in a rare show of affection. "Good luck," he murmured, barely audible, and then, true to form, he disappeared in a swirl of leaves before they could respond. In the quiet that followed, Naruto straightened, still grinning as he adjusted his headband. Kakashi might be a strange sensei, an enigma wrapped in layers of mystery and sarcasm, but he knew one thing for sure: Kakashi believed in them, in all of them, in his own way. And that was enough. Naruto trailed behind his teammates as they entered the exam classroom, letting Sasuke walk ahead of him. Kakashi-sensei had never appointed an official leader, but Naruto found that things went smoother when Sasuke felt like he was in charge. And if a little thing like walking a step behind made Sasuke more manageable, then Naruto was happy to let him take the lead. As soon as he stepped through the door, though, he felt it, that strange, heavy sensation that clawed at his gut, like a wild animal's eyes boring into him. Killing intent. He recognized it instantly, though it didn't scare him like it might have scared others. He remembered asking his Aji-san about it as a child, after encountering a mother bear that had tried to protect her cubs. His Aji-san had explained that killing intent was something shinobi used to intimidate their enemies, to make them feel small and powerless. But Naruto didn't really get it. To him, it was just like someone screaming in his face, annoying, sure, but hardly enough to make him flinch. He dismissed it with a shrug. Whoever was trying to scare him was wasting their time. Naruto's eyes scanned the room, and he caught sight of his teammates already mingling with the other rookies. Kiba's voice carried over the chatter as he loudly boasted about his team's rigorous training regimen. Naruto was about to join them, but then he spotted someone else, a familiar face with sandy blonde hair and teal eyes. Temari. "Hello, Temari-san," he greeted, making his way over to her. He noticed her brothers, Kankuro, who scowled at him, and Gaara, who remained silent but observant, his cold, blank gaze unnerving as ever. Temari smiled, a touch of mischief in her expression. "Hi, Naruto. You didn't tell me you were competing in the exams." "That wasn't very nice," she teased. Naruto tilted his head, unfazed. "I figured, with Kankuro-san following me around all week, that you already knew. I assumed you were trying to gather intel, so I didn't see a need to confirm it." Kankuro's jaw dropped, the shock evident on his painted face. "You knew I was following you?" Naruto blinked, his expression as calm as ever. "Of course." He turned back to Temari. "Well, I must go join my team. Good luck in the exams, Temari-san." With a polite nod, he left, leaving Kankuro sputtering and Temari smiling to herself. When Naruto finally rejoined his teammates, he was immediately pulled into Kiba's boasting session. The Inuzuka boy grinned at him, clearly looking for a bit of friendly competition. "Oh, if it isn't Naruto. Almost didn't see you there. Hope you're ready to get your butt kicked." Naruto hesitated. He wasn't exactly well-versed in this kind of banter, but he remembered Hinata-chan had once asked him to try to get along with her teammates. Kiba seemed to enjoy these exchanges, so Naruto decided to make an attempt. He thought carefully, then replied, "Hello, Kiba-san. Since you lack Hinata-chan's skill in combat and Shino-san's intellect, challenging me would be a pointless endeavor with a predetermined outcome. I'll be sure to embarrass you so thoroughly that Akamaru wishes to join me afterward, as he seems like a good dog in need of a quality partner." Silence fell over the group. Kiba stared, mouth slightly open, as if struggling to process what Naruto had just said. "Dude, what the hell?" Naruto looked around, puzzled by everyone's reactions. "I thought we were exchanging playful jibes in a show of camaraderie. Isn't that what we were doing?" Shino adjusted his glasses, speaking in his calm, even tone. "I believe your jibe, as you called it, was too thorough and too close to the truth to be taken lightly. In the future, I recommend you stay more general to avoid causing offense." Naruto nodded, taking the advice in stride. "Thank you, Shino-san." Shikamaru, who had been watching from the side, muttered, "You're already being troublesome, Naruto." Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. He hadn't forgotten his history with the Nara boy. During their academy days, Naruto had once tried to befriend Shikamaru, only to be brushed off with the words, "It's too troublesome." The dismissive tone, as if Naruto's very presence was a burden, had left a bad taste in his mouth, one he hadn't quite shaken. "So is a tracheal rupture, Nara-san," he replied coolly. Shikamaru's eyes widened a fraction, surprised by the retort. But before he could respond, Ino's voice rang out across the room. "Naruto-kun," she called, her tone light and teasing. She crossed over, hands on her hips as she looked him up and down. "Why do you let billboard brow hang all over Sasuke-kun? I thought we were friends." Naruto turned to her, his expression softening. "Hello, Ino-chan. You look well." Ino grinned, giving him a playful twirl. don't I? And look at you with the face mask. Dressing like your sensei, huh? Hatake-sensei suggested it for the exams, Naruto replied. Said I would look cool. Ino raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Mission accomplished, although if only I could get you out of those orange jackets. You could be a real cutie if you just let go of that color. Naruto tilted his head. I like orange. I like orange too, came a quiet voice, and they all turned to see Hinata, her pale eyes warm as she smiled at Naruto. She added softly, I also like your whisker marks. I hope you won't cover them up permanently. Naruto offered her a small smile, but Hinata's cheeks turned pink as she struggled to maintain her composure. She had to suppress the urge to march over to Kakashi-sensei and demand he remove the face mask. Those whiskered cheeks were hers to admire, and she had no intention of letting them be hidden away. The rookies continued to chat, the familiar camaraderie settling in, until the sound of footsteps silenced them. A tall, stern-looking man entered the room, his gaze sweeping over the assembled genin with an air of authority. The tension in the room shifted, all eyes turning to him as he spoke. Take your assigned seats, he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. The first exam is about to begin. Naruto took a deep breath as he followed his teammates to their seats. He could feel the anticipation thrumming through the room, the undercurrent of excitement and tension thick in the air. But as he settled into his chair, his mind was calm, his thoughts steady. He glanced over at Sasuke, who wore his usual determined scowl, and at Sakura, whose eyes shone with a mix of nervousness and excitement. This was it, the first step in a trial. That would push them to their limits, a chance to prove themselves not just to the village but to each other. The Chunin exams weren't just a test of skill, they were a test of character, of resilience, of the bonds they'd forged as a team. As the examiner began to speak, Naruto felt a faint smile tug at his lips beneath the mask. No matter what came next, he knew one thing for certain, he was ready. Baki's eyes were glued to the screen, a cigarette trembling between his fingers as he watched the blonde demon walk into the exam room with that infuriatingly calm demeanor. Every instinct told him this wasn't right, that this kid wasn't some harmless genin, but a calculated weapon that Konoha was deploying to destabilize and demoralize his team. The boy's very presence made his skin crawl. Baki had seen his fair share of horrors, but nothing unnerved him quite like the sight of Naruto Uzumaki. He knew it was irrational, but watching Naruto breeze through the room and greet his daughter-like student, Temari, so casually, he felt a sudden urge to reach through the screen and strangle the boy. The brat had already done enough damage, eroding Gaara's sanity, breaking Kankuro's spirit, and now inching his way into Temari's good graces with a charm that was anything but innocent. To Baki, it was all an elaborate mind game, a manipulation woven with threads of seduction and deception. Konoha had weaponized this genin, a honey-tongued, wide-eyed devil who knew exactly where to press to make people come undone. And it wasn't just his team. Baki looked around the sensei lounge, noticing the subtle tension in the air, the way the other jounin, veterans from Kumo, Kiri, and even his own Suna, watched the monitors with a strange mix of curiosity and wariness. Naruto was a curiosity, a threat disguised as a genin, and it seemed Baki wasn't the only one who felt it. As the exam began, Ibiki Marino entered the room. Baki recognized him from the bingo book, Konoha's infamous master of interrogation, a man who had broken hardened criminals with nothing more than a cold stare and a handful of whispered words. To most people, he was a boogeyman, the shadow in Konoha's dungeons. And now here he was, proctoring an exam for children. Baki's stomach twisted. Only in Konoha would they think it appropriate to let their chief torturer oversee a test for genin. The rules of the exam became clear quickly enough. The questions were nearly impossible, designed to force the genin to cheat. Baki could see his students taking the hints, using subtle techniques to copy answers. Temari and Kankuro were holding their own, and even Gaara seemed focused, though Baki wasn't sure if he was actually trying or merely watching the others with disinterest. So far, they were fine. And that was all that mattered. Then, he noticed Naruto. Rather than cheat like the others, the blonde just stared. He watched Ibiki with a calm, calculating expression, his blue eyes never wavering. Baki felt a chill as he realized Naruto wasn't intimidated, wasn't even curious about the exam. Instead, he rose from his seat and walked up to the proctor, carrying a small envelope in his hand. What is he doing? Baki muttered, his stomach sinking. A genin plant shouldn't call attention to himself like this. And yet here Naruto was, standing face to face with Konoha's top torturer in the middle of an exam. A voice beside him snapped him out of his daze. Kakashi, what is your student doing? Kurenai asked, her tone curious, tinged with amusement. Baki's head whipped toward her, and his eyes widened as he turned to Kakashi, who stood by with his usual casual demeanor. The Hatake Kakashi, the infamous copy ninja, the last student of the kill-happy Yondaime Hokage, was Naruto's sensei? Baki had assumed the blonde was some sort of plant, a tool Konoha had slipped into the exam to destabilize the competition. But an actual genin, trained by Kakashi? A chill ran down Baki's spine. Kakashi's visible eye crinkled in an amused smile. Oh, he's just doing something cool, he replied nonchalantly. Baki barely registered the answer. His mind reeled as he watched Naruto continue his cool act, calmly negotiating with Ibiki in full view of the other genin. Naruto placed an envelope on the proctor's desk, which Ibiki opened, inspecting the contents with a raised eyebrow. They spoke quietly, exchanging words Baki couldn't hear, but he caught enough to see Ibiki holding up 3 fingers, followed by Naruto shaking his head and holding up 2. A few moments later, Naruto placed a second, thicker envelope on the desk along with 2 small bags of snack mix. Ibiki looked down at the offering, his face expressionless, and then handed Naruto a slip of paper before shaking his hand. Beside him, Asuma Sarutobi let out a chuckle. Did he just bribe Ibiki for the answers? Kakashi nodded, his tone filled with pride. Yes, he did. Baki's mouth went dry. He turned away from the screen, needing confirmation, needing to know that he hadn't just seen a genin bribe Konoha's head interrogator in the middle of the Chunin exams. But Kakashi seemed perfectly at ease, his eye smile betraying nothing but amusement. It is pretty cool, a low, lazy voice drawled from the corner. Baki glanced over and recognized Samui, one of the top kunoichi from Kumo. She was watching Naruto with a detached, appraising look, her blue eyes narrowing as if she were trying to puzzle him out. Mabui, Kumo's other notable kunoichi, looked at her friend with a slight blush. Yes. I believe that's the boy I ran into a few days ago, she murmured, almost to herself. Baki gritted his teeth, feeling the tension thrum through him. This boy, this strange devil in genin's clothing, was like a whirlwind that left everyone around him in shambles. It was as if he cast some kind of spell, on friends and enemies alike, pulling them into his orbit without even trying. If Naruto was focused on Kumo, maybe that would give Suna a break. Maybe. But Baki had a sinking feeling that he wasn't that lucky. The exam dragged on, and Ibiki began to ratchet up the pressure, his cold gaze scanning the room, the heavy atmosphere weighing on the genin like a vice. Baki could see the fear spreading among the younger shinobi, their nervous glances and shaking hands as they grappled with the psychological strain. One by one, weaker teams folded, opting to forfeit rather than risk failure. It was a brutal test of fortitude, exactly the kind of twisted game Konoha specialized in. But Naruto didn't seem bothered in the least. He sat calmly, relaxed, as if he were waiting for a stroll through the park rather than enduring a mental gauntlet designed to break his spirit. Baki could see him exchanging quiet looks with his teammates, Sasuke and Sakura, their expressions hardening with determination as they chose to stay. And then Ibiki dropped his final bombshell, the infamous 10th question. A choice, take it and risk being a genin forever, or leave and try again next year. It was an obvious bluff, a lie that any experienced shinobi could see through. But the genin, worn down by the relentless mental assault, were too shaken to notice. One after another, they left, clutching at the out Ibiki had dangled before them, relieved to escape the trial. When Ibiki finally announced the end of the test, barely half the teams remained. Baki let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. As he tried to process the outcome, the classroom window shattered, and a kunoichi burst through in a whirl of energy, striking a pose and introducing herself as the sexy and single Anko Mitarashi. Baki's stomach churned at the sight. Another torturer. Another twisted proctor ready to test these kids with the kind of methods usually reserved for hardened criminals. Baki wasn't sure whether to feel disgusted or impressed. Konoha had truly made an art out of psychological warfare, and even their children were trained to endure it, or to inflict it. From the corner of his eye, he saw Asuma heading out to the patio, fumbling for his pack of cigarettes. Baki felt a fierce urge to join him. In Suna, it would be fine, just two jounin, taking a break together, uniting in their quiet fear for their teams. But here, as a visitor, it felt different. He didn't want to project weakness, to let anyone see how rattled he truly was. Yet he knew that his calm facade was wearing thin, that every effort to mask his nerves only made him feel more exposed. The truth was, Baki felt utterly unprepared. He had allowed himself to believe that Konoha had gone soft, resting on the strength of a few key players and their legacy. But he was realizing now, too late, that this was a village that thrived in the shadows, a place where even genin could be ruthless manipulators and psychological assassins. Every encounter, every gesture, every exchange was layered with intent, designed to reveal, to test, to fracture. And now, his team, the vanguard of Suna's coming invasion, was walking into a carefully laid trap, one they couldn't even see. He forced himself to remain still, to not betray a single emotion. But deep down, the seeds of doubt had taken root. The invasion was supposed to be straightforward, a display of strength and cunning. Yet here, in the heart of Konoha, he felt like he was losing ground with every passing moment. As he watched Naruto rejoin his teammates, flashing them a calm smile as if none of this fazed him, Baki felt a chill of foreboding settle over him. He'd thought he was facing Konoha's genin, a mere formality on the road to war. Now, he wondered if they weren't facing something far more dangerous, a village that had honed deception, resilience, and mind games to a razor's edge, and a blonde demon child who seemed to embody all of it. Baki swallowed hard, his hands tightening into fists. For the first time, he felt something close to fear. Naruto's clone vanished into a wisp of smoke, leaving only the traces of the Fuinjutsu array still burning on the ground where he'd faced the impostor. In the forest of death, the real Naruto stood on a branch high in the dense canopy, his face shadowed by the leaves, his expression hard and unyielding. For once, there was no trace of his usual carefree demeanor, only a cold focus that seemed to radiate from him as he processed what he'd just learned. Orochimaru. One of the most infamous missing nin in the world. The traitorous Sannin who had abandoned Konoha years ago, leaving a trail of twisted experiments and broken lives in his wake. And now he was here, hiding in the forest of death, targeting him and, worse, using Anko-chan as bait. Naruto's grip on his kunai tightened. He felt a flash of anger, an unfamiliar, searing feeling that burned through the usual calm he cultivated. Anko was one of the few people in Konoha who treated him as a person, not as a weapon or a demon or a nuisance. She'd taught him things outside the normal scope of a genin's training, showed him some of her own tricks with kunai and traps. She was wild, fierce, and more than a little rough around the edges, but Naruto respected her. And now Orochimaru had taken her, using her to draw him into some twisted game. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to think clearly. He couldn't afford to let anger cloud his judgment. This wasn't just about him or Anko, this was a bigger threat, one that could shake the village to its core if it went unchecked. Orochimaru wouldn't be here for something trivial. Whatever he was planning, it was dangerous, and Naruto would have to be careful. With a single hand sign, he summoned 2 more shadow clones. They flickered into existence beside him, their eyes as focused as his own. "Find her," he ordered, his voice low. The clones nodded and darted off into the forest, each moving silently through the treetops, slipping into the shadows like wraiths. They would search for Anko, spreading out in different directions to cover more ground. As they disappeared, Naruto took a moment to collect himself, analyzing the situation. Orochimaru's words replayed in his mind, "You have the purest, most wonderful gift, but you don't honor it. You don't enjoy it." The words echoed with a dark, insinuating tone, as if Orochimaru understood something about Naruto that even he didn't fully grasp. But Naruto didn't have time to unravel whatever twisted fascination the Sannin had with him. Right now, all that mattered was finding Anko and getting her out of danger. He closed his eyes briefly, focusing on the sounds and sensations around him, the distant cries of animals, the rustle of leaves, the faint echoes of genin squads crashing through the underbrush as they engaged in battles for survival and scrolls. But in all of it, he searched for something else, something darker, something that didn't belong. After a moment, he sensed it, a faint, oppressive chakra signature, tainted with an oily, malevolent energy. It wasn't close, but it was there, lurking like a serpent in the shadows. "Got you." Naruto set off, leaping through the branches with a speed and silence that belied his age, weaving through the dense foliage with single-minded purpose. He didn't know what he would find, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to let Orochimaru hurt anyone else. Back at the starting point, Sakura and Sasuke were waiting at the edge of the forest, trying to understand Naruto's sudden disappearance. Sakura's brows were knit in concern as she scanned the shadows, her eyes lingering on the path where she'd last seen her teammate. "Sasuke, something's wrong," she murmured, glancing over at him. "Did you see Naruto's face when Anko-sensei gave us the scrolls? He looked different." Sasuke's gaze was fixed ahead, his expression unreadable. "He's probably just taking this seriously," he replied, though even he seemed unsure. "The forest of death isn't like anything we've been through before." "You heard Anko," she said. "We'll either hunt or die." Maybe Naruto's finally realized what's at stake here. Sakura bit her lip, not entirely convinced. She'd known Naruto long enough to recognize when something was off, and this was definitely off. But before she could voice her doubts, Sasuke's gaze sharpened, and he turned his head, his eyes narrowing at a sudden rustling in the trees nearby. "Naruto?" she called, a hint of hope in her voice. But instead of their teammate, a group of older genin from another village emerged from the shadows, smirking as they sized up their targets. One of them, a tall boy with a jagged scar across his face, grinned at them with predatory intent. Well, he sneered. "Looks like we found some easy targets." Sasuke stepped forward, his Sharingan flashing into life, and Sakura took a deep breath, her stance shifting as she prepared herself for a fight. For now, they would have to manage on their own. She only hoped that Naruto would find his way back to them before things got out of hand. Deep in the forest, Naruto's clones scouted the area with an efficiency born of practice, each covering a wide perimeter, searching for any trace of Anko or Orochimaru. They moved quickly and silently, knowing that time was of the essence. Then, one of the clones came to a sudden halt, its eyes widening as it spotted a figure slumped against a tree. The woman was bloodied, her purple hair matted with dirt and sweat, her breathing ragged but steady. "Anko-chan." The clone dropped down from the trees, landing softly beside her. It reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder gently. Anko's eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain, but a smirk tugged at the corner of her mouth when she saw him. "Little brat, Took you long enough, she rasped, her voice rough. The clone's gaze softened. Enko-chan, are you alright? She coughed, a painful, wet sound. Had worse, she muttered, trying to sit up but wincing as a fresh wave of pain coursed through her. Damn snake got the jump on me, didn't think he'd actually show up here of all places. We're going to get you out of here, the clone assured her, keeping its voice calm and steady. The real me is on his way. Just hold on. But Enko shook her head, a faint, almost resigned smile on her lips. You don't get it, kid, he's not after me. He's after you. The clone's eyes narrowed, but it said nothing. It already knew. Orochimaru had made it clear enough. Listen to me, Enko whispered, her voice barely audible. Orochimaru, he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. He's looking for something in you. I don't know what it is, but, you have to be careful. Don't let him get in your head. The clone nodded, its expression resolute. I'll keep him away from you, Enko-chan. I promise. Enko's hand tightened on his sleeve, her eyes hard despite the pain. Don't make promises you can't keep, kid. Just, stay alive, alright? And get out of here if you have to. Don't be a hero. The clone nodded again, then dispelled itself, sending the information back to the real Naruto in an instant. High above, in the canopy, the original Naruto paused as the memories flooded into him, filling him with a grim determination. He altered his course, zeroing in on the spot where Enko was hidden. She was alive, but barely, and Orochimaru was still somewhere in the forest, waiting, watching, turning this whole ordeal into a twisted game. Naruto's eyes hardened. He wasn't about to let this monster do as he pleased. If Orochimaru wanted a hunt, then Naruto would give him one. But this wouldn't be a game, not by any means. This would be a reckoning. Naruto pressed forward, his focus sharper than it had ever been. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, the weight of the situation settling into his bones. He wasn't just hunting a missing nin, he was up against Orochimaru, one of the Sannin, a legendary figure whose power was said to rival that of any Kage. But Naruto wasn't afraid. He was angry. Orochimaru had targeted him, used Enko as bait, and threatened his teammates, all for some twisted notion of testing him. The whole thing made Naruto's blood boil, but he forced himself to keep calm. He had to be smart about this. He couldn't just rush in blindly, not against someone like Orochimaru. Naruto's clones had located Enko, and he could see her position in his mind. She was hurt, and she'd warned him that Orochimaru wasn't going to stop until he got what he wanted. But what did he want? Enko had said something about Orochimaru looking for something in him, and Naruto could only guess at what that meant. His mind went to the seal on his stomach, the fox lying in wait within him, but even that didn't seem like the full story. Orochimaru's gaze had held something beyond mere curiosity. It was the gaze of a predator sizing up rare prey, something he wanted to mold or shape into something else. Naruto shook the thoughts from his mind. It didn't matter what Orochimaru wanted. All that mattered was that Enko was in danger, and he had to get her out. He dropped down into a clearing, moving quickly toward the spot where his clone had found Enko. The dense foliage parted as he slipped through, his senses on high alert for any hint of movement, any sign of danger. When he arrived, he found Enko slumped against the base of a tree, her face pale, her body still. Enko-chan, he whispered, kneeling beside her and placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked up at him, her lips curling into a weak, but fierce smile. Naruto, you're really here, she murmured, her voice hoarse. She tried to push herself up, but winced, her injuries clearly taking their toll. Should have known, you wouldn't stay away. Naruto's face softened, but his tone was resolute. I'm getting you out of here, Enko-chan. We'll find somewhere safe, and I'll make sure that snake doesn't get anywhere near you again." She let out a faint, bitter laugh, coughing as she leaned back against the tree. "He's not interested in me anymore, kid. I'm old news. It's you he wants. He's obsessed." She grabbed his arm, her fingers tightening with surprising strength. "Naruto, you need to understand. Orochimaru doesn't stop. He doesn't let go of something he wants. He'll chase you to the ends of the earth if he has to." Naruto nodded, his expression grim. "Then I'll make sure he doesn't get what he wants." Enko looked at him, her gaze searching, as if she were seeing him for the first time. "You're a stubborn brat, you know that," she whispered, a hint of pride mingling with her exhaustion. "But, thank you." Without another word, Naruto lifted her onto his back, careful not to jostle her wounds. Enko held on, her breathing shallow but steady, and Naruto began to move through the forest, leaping from branch to branch as quietly as he could manage. But he knew they weren't alone. The oppressive weight of Orochimaru's chakra lingered somewhere in the shadows, like a snake coiled to strike. Naruto could feel it slithering through the trees, watching, waiting. The Sannin was toying with them, letting them run just long enough to feel a shred of hope before he'd inevitably close in. But Naruto wasn't going to play Orochimaru's game. He had his own plan, and if he was going to survive this, he'd need every advantage he could muster. As he moved, he whispered to Enko, "I need you to hang on just a little longer, okay?" Enko gave a weak nod, her voice barely a whisper. "Just, don't get yourself killed, idiot." Naruto's lips quirked up in a faint smile. "I'll do my best." They moved in silence for several minutes, each second stretching into an eternity as they made their way deeper into the forest. Naruto knew he couldn't get too far, Orochimaru would find them eventually. Instead, he was heading for a specific location, a small, secluded hollow he'd discovered during his training. If they could get there, he could set up a defensive perimeter, maybe buy them enough time to regroup and come up with a plan. But before they could reach it, the oppressive chakra presence sharpened, closing in like a vice around them. Naruto came to a halt, every muscle tensed as he scanned the shadows. He could feel Orochimaru drawing near, the Sannin's chakra thick and suffocating, like a miasma that clung to the air. "Going somewhere, Naruto-kun?" The voice slithered through the darkness, dripping with amusement. Orochimaru stepped out from the shadows, his golden eyes gleaming with a sick fascination as he regarded Naruto and Enko with a serpentine smile. Naruto placed Enko carefully against the trunk of a nearby tree, positioning himself between her and Orochimaru. His expression was calm, his blue eyes cold as he met Orochimaru's gaze. "Orochimaru," he said, his voice steady. "If you're here to take me on some kind of test, let Enko-chan go first. She's hurt, and this doesn't involve her." Orochimaru tilted his head, a look of mock pity crossing his face. "Oh, but Naruto-kun, everything involves her. She's my little failed experiment, after all." His smile widened, eyes gleaming with malice. "And besides, I find it rather touching how protective you are. Such a rare quality in a shinobi. You're like your sensei in that way." Naruto's fists clenched, but he forced himself to remain still. He knew better than to let Orochimaru's taunts get to him. This was a man who thrived on manipulating others, who delighted in finding their weaknesses and exploiting them. Naruto wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his tone flat. Orochimaru's smile widened, and he took a step closer, his gaze appraising. "Oh, so many things, Naruto-kun. I see potential in you. A rare, untapped power that could be molded into something magnificent." He raised a pale hand, gesturing toward Naruto almost fondly. "You are a vessel, Naruto-kun, a container for something that goes beyond mere talent. I've watched you, and I can tell you haven't even begun to scratch the surface of what you're capable of." Naruto's eyes narrowed. If that's all you're after, then you're wasting your time. I'm not interested in being molded into anything. Orochimaru's chuckle was low and chilling. Oh, I expected as much. But that's what makes this so delightful. You have a fire in you, Naruto-kun, a spark that refuses to be extinguished. That's what I want to see how far I can push you before that spark either explodes into brilliance, or is snuffed out entirely. Naruto felt his jaw clench, his grip on his kunai tightening. Orochimaru was watching him with the intensity of a predator, a twisted kind of admiration in his gaze. The man was unhinged, obsessed with the potential he saw in others, potential he wanted to twist and shape to fit his own designs. Naruto took a step forward, his stance low and ready. Then come on, he said, his voice low and defiant. If you're so eager to test me, let's get this over with. Orochimaru's grin widened, his eyes glinting with dark excitement. Oh, I was hoping you'd say that. With a sudden burst of speed, Orochimaru lunged, his movements blurring as he closed the distance between them. Naruto leapt back, barely avoiding the strike as Orochimaru's hand shot out, aiming for his throat. The Sannin was fast, faster than anyone Naruto had ever faced, and he barely had time to react before Orochimaru was upon him again, his strikes precise and relentless. Naruto ducked and weaved, his instincts guiding him as he dodged blow after blow. He could feel the oppressive weight of Orochimaru's chakra pressing down on him, but he refused to back down. He'd trained for this. He'd fought to prove himself, to show that he was more than just a container, more than just a boy with a fox inside. He was Uzumaki Naruto, and he wasn't going to break. Orochimaru's laughter echoed through the forest, a mocking, chilling sound that seemed to seep into the very air. Yes, yes. Show me more, Naruto-kun. Show me what you're made of. Naruto's eyes blazed with determination as he threw a kunai, forcing Orochimaru to dodge. In that split second, he gathered his chakra, forming a shadow clone beside him. The clone moved in sync, each of them darting around the clearing, forcing Orochimaru to divide his focus. But Orochimaru was relentless, his gaze never wavering as he struck down the clone in a single, fluid motion, his attention snapping back to Naruto with a predatory gleam. You'll have to do better than that, he purred, his voice a twisted mockery of encouragement. Naruto took a deep breath, centering himself. He knew he couldn't defeat Orochimaru outright, he wasn't delusional. But if he could buy enough time, distract him long enough, maybe, just maybe, he could get Enko to safety. He looked up at the monster before him, his gaze steady. If it's a test he wants, then I'll give him one he'll never forget. Sasuke and Sakura stared at Naruto, their shock and disbelief only deepening as he spoke with a calm certainty, his every word sharpening the reality of the situation they'd just been thrust into. The black scroll he'd handed them had revealed a truth they could scarcely comprehend. Orochimaru, one of the Sannin, a legendary figure known for his terrifying power and his betrayal of Konoha, was somewhere in the forest, lurking, hunting. And he had taken Enko hostage. Naruto was no longer the loud, grinning boy they knew. His expression was steely, focused, and his voice carried a weight that was utterly foreign to them. Gone was his usual orange jacket, replaced by a tactical vest filled with weapons, sealing scrolls, and ninja tools. He looked like someone preparing for war. Naruto, this is insane, Sakura whispered, clutching the black scroll tightly. You can't seriously be thinking of going after him alone. You know what he's capable of. Naruto turned to her, his expression unwavering. Sakura-san, he said gently, I'm the only one who can do this. I know you both want to help, but you'd only be in danger if you came with me. Orochimaru, he's in a different league. Even if I don't survive, I might buy enough time for Enko-chan to escape. I owe her that much. Sakura's face crumpled with worry, but Naruto's words had struck her silent. She couldn't argue against the logic he was presenting, but the thought of him facing someone as monstrous as Orochimaru alone made her feel sick. She opened her mouth to protest again, but he placed a firm hand on her shoulder, his gaze steady and reassuring. "Sakura-san," he said softly, "you're strong. I need you to get to the tower and alert the Jounin sensei. Let them know Orochimaru is in the forest. They'll know what to do." He hesitated, then added, "And make sure Sasuke-san gets there too. He's a target too." Sasuke's fists clenched at Naruto's words. He hadn't said much since reading the scroll, he was too busy grappling with the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions raging inside him. Orochimaru, a member of the Sannin, was here, and he wanted him, Uchiha Sasuke. But why? What could Orochimaru possibly want from him? And why was Naruto so calm, so ready to throw himself into this suicidal mission? Finally, Sasuke found his voice. "Naruto," he said, his tone hesitant but determined. "You don't have to do this alone. I'm an Uchiha, I'm stronger than you give me credit for. If we go together, we might have a better chance." Naruto's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, a flicker of his usual grin appeared. "Sasuke-san, you are strong. You're both strong. But strength alone won't be enough here. Orochimaru is something else." His voice grew somber. "And if I have to use the full extent of my power, it's best you aren't anywhere near me." Sasuke's brow furrowed in confusion, but Naruto's gaze didn't waver. There was something unspoken in his eyes, something that hinted at a side of himself they'd never seen. Sasuke realized, with a cold jolt, that he didn't truly know what Naruto was capable of. He didn't know what secrets Naruto held or what sacrifices he was willing to make. "Please, Sasuke-san," Naruto continued, his voice steady but pleading. "You and Sakura-san are strong enough to survive this exam. You're good enough to make it to the tower, and if I don't come back, then at least you'll carry the warning." The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. Sakura looked down at the ground, her fingers gripping the black scroll so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She wanted to fight, to argue, to scream at Naruto for being so stubborn, but in her heart, she knew he was right. He was the only one who stood a chance of even stalling Orochimaru. Finally, with a shaky breath, Sakura nodded. "Fine. But you better come back, Naruto," she whispered, her voice filled with a fierce determination. "You're not allowed to just die out there." Naruto smiled, a sad, understanding smile. "I'll do my best, Sakura-san." Sasuke took a step forward, clenching his fists. "If you survive, I'll see you at the tower," he said, his tone betraying a reluctant acceptance. "Just don't die before I get a chance to beat you myself." Naruto's smile widened, and he gave Sasuke a small nod. "I wouldn't dream of it." With that, he turned, his gaze fixed on the dark path ahead, his body radiating a quiet resolve. His two teammates watched as he took a deep breath, then vanished into the shadows of the forest, moving with a grace and silence they hadn't known he possessed. Sakura and Sasuke stood in stunned silence for a moment, the weight of Naruto's words hanging over them. Then, steeling herself, Sakura looked at Sasuke. "We need to get to the tower, Sasuke-kun. If what he said is true, the Jounin sensei need to know." Sasuke nodded, his face grim. "Yeah. Let's go." Naruto moved swiftly through the forest, his mind focused, his senses on high alert. The oppressive weight of Orochimaru's chakra lingered, like a dark cloud hanging over the entire area, but Naruto pushed forward, refusing to let it intimidate him. He knew the odds weren't in his favor. He knew that facing Orochimaru alone was as good as a death sentence. But if there was even the slightest chance he could save Anko and prevent this monster from reaching his teammates, he had to try. He thought of Anko, of the way she trained him, the way she treated him with respect and camaraderie despite her rough edges. She'd been more than a mentor, she'd been a friend, someone who understood the shadows that hung over him. And now she was suffering because of him, because of the twisted fascination Orochimaru seemed to hold for him. Naruto's jaw clenched. He wasn't about to let Orochimaru take anyone else. Not if he could help it. As he moved through the trees, his mind raced, analyzing every technique he knew, every trick he'd ever learned, trying to formulate a plan. He didn't have much time. Orochimaru would find him soon enough, and he'd need every ounce of strategy, every scrap of power he had to survive. Finally, he reached a small clearing, the thick foliage giving way to a circle of open space surrounded by towering trees. Naruto stopped, catching his breath as he prepared himself for what was to come. And then, almost as if summoned by his thoughts, the dark presence he'd sensed earlier emerged from the shadows, sliding into the clearing like a snake. Orochimaru appeared, his movements fluid and silent, his golden eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Ah, Naruto-kun," Orochimaru greeted, his voice soft and sibilant, carrying a twisted kind of delight. "I was beginning to think you'd run away." Naruto's gaze was cold as he met the Sannin's eyes, his stance steady. "I'm not running. I came here to end this." Orochimaru chuckled, the sound low and mocking. "And this? Oh, Naruto-kun, you misunderstand. This isn't something that can be ended so easily. You fascinate me. And I am not so easily deterred." Naruto gripped his kunai tightly, his mind racing. He needed to keep Orochimaru focused on him, to buy enough time for Anko, for Sakura and Sasuke, for anyone else who might get caught in this monster's path. "Whatever you're after," Naruto said, his voice steady, "you're not going to get it. Not from me." Orochimaru's eyes gleamed, a dangerous, predatory light. "Oh, I wouldn't be so sure of that. There is something about you, Naruto-kun, something raw and powerful, waiting to be unlocked. Don't you want to know what you're truly capable of?" Naruto didn't flinch, his voice sharp and unwavering. "I know enough. And I'm not interested in whatever gift you think you can give me." Orochimaru's smile widened, his tongue flicking out in a serpentine motion. "Such defiance. You remind me of your father, the same fire, the same spirit. But even he would have faltered before what I offer." Naruto's eyes narrowed. He wouldn't let Orochimaru's words distract him. He knew the Sannin was trying to get into his head, to unsettle him, but Naruto was ready. With a surge of chakra, Naruto created several shadow clones, each one fanning out around Orochimaru, forming a loose circle. Orochimaru's eyes sparkled with amusement, but he didn't move, waiting, watching, as if curious to see what Naruto would do. Without hesitation, Naruto launched himself at Orochimaru, his clones following in perfect sync, each of them moving with calculated precision, each strike aimed with deadly intent. Orochimaru dodged with ease, his movements fluid and inhuman, but Naruto pressed forward, his determination unwavering. Orochimaru laughed, a low, chilling sound that echoed through the clearing. Yes, Naruto-kun. Show me what you're made of." Naruto gritted his teeth, pushing himself harder, faster. He knew he couldn't win, but he didn't care. He would give Orochimaru everything he had, every ounce of strength, every spark of resolve. Because if this was going to be his end, he'd make sure that Orochimaru would never forget the name Uzumaki Naruto. The Forest of Death had never lived up to its name more than in that moment. The rookie Konoha teams and Team Guy stood scattered among the trees, clutching identical black scrolls, the words written inside reshaping their understanding of the Chunin exams entirely. It wasn't just a test of skill anymore. It was a hunt. Every team read the same list, each line more shocking than the last, each name carrying a staggering bounty. Tenten of Team Guy. Ino of Team 10. Hinata of Team 8. And Uzumaki Naruto, son of the Yondaime Hokage, with a bounty so large it seemed unreal. 10 million ryo. The weight of that final line settled over everyone, some in fear, others in stunned realization. It was a secret no one outside the highest ranks of Konoha knew. And yet, here it was, exposed in black ink, painting a target on Naruto's back as bright and deadly as his father's legacy. With Team Guy, Lee, and Neji turned to Tenten, their faces a mixture of shock and confusion. Tenten gripped her scroll tightly, her knuckles white. She was one of the targets? It didn't make any sense. But then, her eyes landed on Naruto's name, and the revelation hit her like a punch to the gut. Son of the fourth Hokage. Suddenly, everything she thought she knew about the loud, orange-wearing boy seemed to shift. Neji, usually calm and composed, looked unsettled. Why would they do this? He murmured, glancing back down at the bounty list. This isn't part of the exam. This is a death sentence. Lee clenched his fists, his fierce determination tempered by a shadow of worry. Then we must protect Tenten. And Naruto-kun, and the others too, he declared, his eyes blazing with the same resolve that carried him through every challenge. This is a test of our loyalty as Konoha shinobi. Tenten managed a shaky nod, though her heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't help but think of Naruto somewhere out there, unknowingly marked for death just as she was. But the weight of his lineage, and his value to the village, made her own predicament seem insignificant by comparison. With Team 10, Shikamaru read the scroll once, then twice, as if hoping the words would change. But they didn't. His mind immediately spun into overdrive, running through strategies, escape routes, and potential threats. His first instinct was to get his team out of the forest, fast. This wasn't just an exam anymore. This was a free-for-all, and every other team in the forest would be gunning for one of those bounties. We need to move, Shikamaru said, his voice low and tense. If people start hunting us, it won't just be to pass the exam. They'll be going for the kill. Ino's face was pale as she processed her own name on the list. Heiress of the Yamanaka clan, 2.5 million ryo. The bounty wasn't as high as Naruto's or Hinata's, but it was more than enough to tempt other teams. She glanced at Choji, who was staring at her with wide, concerned eyes. Shika, what do we do? Ino whispered, her voice trembling. Despite her bravado, the reality of the situation was starting to sink in. She was a target. She was worth millions. Shikamaru looked at her, his gaze steely despite the fear he felt churning inside. We survive. We get to the tower as quickly as possible, and we stay out of sight. This isn't a game anymore. On Team 8, Hinata was the one who'd gone quiet, her normally gentle eyes filled with a fierce intensity. Her teammates looked at her in surprise, unused to seeing her this way. Hinata was worth 4 million ryo, an amount that could make even a jonin reconsider their loyalties. Kiba watched her warily, shifting from foot to foot. Hinata, are you all right? He asked, trying to gauge her reaction. Hinata didn't look at him. Instead, her gaze was steely, her voice a quiet murmur, almost to herself. If they think I'm prey, they're sorely mistaken. She clenched her fists, her chakra flaring just slightly. The lioness is going on the hunt. Shino's eyebrow arched, but he said nothing. He simply nodded, understanding her determination without needing any further explanation. He and Kiba exchanged a glance, their own protective instincts sharpening. If the forest of death wanted to turn them into hunters and hunted, then they would meet it head-on. But it was Team 7 that faced the most profound change. Sasuke and Sakura stared at Naruto as if he'd transformed before their very eyes. The moment he'd read the black scroll, Naruto had changed. Gone was the bright orange jacket, replaced by a combat vest that bore Kakashi-sensei's influence. Strapped to his back was a tanto, and 2 eskrima sticks rested at his sides. Sealing scrolls dotted his vest, each one carrying enough weaponry to take down a small army. He was armed, armored, and deadly serious. Sakura watched, wide-eyed, as Naruto detached his thigh holster and strapped it to her leg with practiced, efficient movements. She almost didn't register his hand on her upper thigh as he secured the holster, too shocked by the transformation in her teammate to react. "Sakura-san, that holster contains my emitter discs," Naruto explained calmly. "They've been primed to your chakra signature. Tiger seal causes an explosion. Rat, paralysis. Snake, flash bang. Bird, snapback. The larger the pulse, the greater the effect. The edges are extremely sharp, so throw them like shuriken." Sakura blinked, trying to process his words. She barely managed to stammer, Why are you explaining this like you won't be with us?" Naruto's eyes didn't waver. "Because I won't. The person who hijacked the exam has my friend, and I'm going to get her." "Then we'll go together, Naruto," Sakura insisted, her voice pleading. She couldn't bear the thought of him going off alone, not against someone powerful enough to hijack an entire exam. But Naruto shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "He's far beyond anyone in this exam. To have a chance, I'll have to use techniques that you haven't seen. I can't predict your placement or reactions, and if you're with me, I'll be holding back. I need you to get to the Jounin and tell them what's happening." Sakura looked to Sasuke for support, hoping he would agree with her, but Sasuke's face was a mask of confusion and shock. His mind was spinning with the words he'd read on the scroll, Uzumaki Naruto, son of the Yondaime Hokage. Naruto, the idiot he'd trained with, the boy he'd dismissed as annoying, was the legacy of the Yellow Flash, a figure Sasuke had idolized in secret. Sasuke's voice was low, almost strained. Are you sure you can do this?" Naruto's eyes hardened, his jaw set. "No. I will probably die trying. But that knowledge frees me from certain limitations." His gaze softened slightly as he looked at his teammates. "But you too reintroduce those limitations." Sakura's voice shook as she demanded, "If you think you'll die, then why go?" Naruto's expression was resolute, his voice calm. "Because he has Enko-chan. If she's still alive, I have to play his game to even have a chance of saving her. And if she's already dead, then I'll make sure he pays for it. I'm confident you two will complete the exam and get to the tower. Just tell the Jounin that Orochimaru of the Sannin is in the forest, and he has a potential hostage." Sasuke's eyes widened. Orochimaru. The name was infamous, a whispered nightmare in Konoha, the snake who had abandoned the village and left scars in his wake. And now Naruto was walking into the forest to face him alone. Before they could say another word, Naruto turned and started walking away, his form merging with the shadows of the forest. He didn't look back. Sakura swallowed hard, her chest tight as she watched him disappear. She wanted to call after him, to demand he stay, to make him promise to come back alive. But as she looked at his departing figure, the strength in his stride, the quiet determination in his posture, she knew he wouldn't be stopped. So she stood there, fighting back tears, whispering to herself, "Come back, Naruto. Please, come back." But he was gone. Left behind in the clearing, the little black scroll lay discarded on the forest floor, its words lingering in their minds like a curse, as an added stipulation to this year's exam, for Konoha Genin have been selected as VIPs. If you manage to kill one of these VIPs and show proof of death in the central tower, you will be rewarded accordingly. 1010 of Team Guy, 1.5 million Ryo. Yamanaka Ino, heiress of the Yamanaka clan, 2.5 million Ryo. Hyuga Hinata, heiress of the Hyuga clan, 4 million Ryo. Uzumaki Naruto, son of the Yondaime Hokage, the Yellow Flash, Namikaze Minato, 10 million Ryo. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button and subscribe for more content. Support the original author by clicking their profile link in the pinned comment of the first video of this series. they deserve the love. Want early access and exclusive content? Join my Patreon community, link below. Your support fuels these videos. Drop a comment with your thoughts, and I'll catch you in the next video. Stay entertained, stay safe. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button and subscribe for more content. Support the original author by clicking their profile link in the pinned comment of the first video of this series. They deserve the love. Want early access and exclusive content? Join my Patreon community, link below. Your support fuels these videos. Drop a comment with your thoughts, and I'll catch you in the next video. Stay entertained, stay safe.